So, welcome to another episode of Real Libertarians. This one will be sort of shorter. We're just going to discuss some general stuff involving the culture and involving how best to interface with it. And basically, like, I there was a, I guess, pseudo hostile exchange before this, but I'm going to try to keep this as reasonable as possible. Um, and like on my end, and like obviously people are free to post things in chat about the sort of questions that they have, and basically the subject is like, to what extent is there a problem in libertarian culture with certain acceptance of certain cultural elements, and additionally, what do we do about it and how best to go about that. So before we get started, for anybody who hasn't already heard from either of these people, Appellation and Rose, we can introduce. We will start with Appellation, and then, because pretty sure that your introduction is
I'm
going to
ready
be the
this
same.
time. Yes, I live in the mountains. No one can find me. I'm a relative of Bigfoot, and if you think that you can go to the Appalachian Mountains and have a state, well, you got another thing coming, buddy.
And then Rose?
Yeah, I'm Rose. I'm the entire reason this episode is needed because I started the entire argument.
It takes multiple people to argue. I don't do that whole thing where it's like it has to be one person's fault. Like, that was one of the things in school that fucked with me, is when I would have an argument with somebody, with people, and like, because I was involved in the argument, they would say, "You're arguing." And it's like, yeah, so are all these other people. It's like, yeah, it's like, and it's like a consistent thing into adulthood. Like, somebody would be like, well, I don't want to have this argument. And like, it'll be like, yeah, but you argued. So I never want to be that person. It's like my previous housemate here, who I won't make this about, but like she wanted to institute fucking times to use the kitchen, and
Wow.
while while she is no longer with us, I'm so sad. In terms of
What
like,
did you do?
in terms of like, she has been expelled by ritual. We have also burnt some sage.
You should always say that you've left them behind because you're so fast.
Yeah, right. Basically, like, the thing that it turned out to be was like, I kept on saying that we don't need that. It's been fucking like fine for all the years that you weren't here, and we don't need to start that now. And she's like, well, I don't want to argue about it. And I'm like, well, then don't. And then she threw my food. So yeah, I'm happy she's gone. Point is, like, and I was an asshole today. I'm not like the beacon of civility. Holy shit. Like, that's one of the things. Like, I'll never be that person. I am a fucking asshole a lot of the time. And some of the time it's warranted, some of the time it's not. But either way, like, if I was like, oh yeah, people have to be exclusively nice, and like, oh, it's just I'm beset on all sides by arguments. No. No, I played my hand in that argument. It's not your fault. But
Okay, well, in that case, this is all his fault. He's the reason we're here tonight.
Oh, I am? Yeah, no, it's 100% my fault. You see, what I did was, I'm the puppet
He was
master.
just there. He was present in that chat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see. Well, every time that I saw the conversation was almost at a close, I would say something, and just to see it spark back up again, because I love chaos, and I'm a bad actor here. But anyway, I've moved on. That's the past. I'm good now, and you can all trust me 100%.
Well, so go.
Yeah. Sorry. No. Yeah. You go ahead. You introduce it first.
Just basically, like, there are problems in certain libertarian circles, as far as I say, and as far as multiple other people say. It depending on the camp you come from, the problems are like either one thing or another. But like, we were having basically a discussion about what to do when that problem arises, and like, I think it's an interesting sort of discussion to have. Like, What's the extent of the problem that is required before the problem should be mentioned, addressed, and solved? And how best to get that problem mentioned, addressed, and solved effectively is the question.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably. I think that's it's best to consider those two separate questions because they would have slightly different answers.
Yeah.
You know, what standards we should have, and then once we have those standards, how should we react to enforcing those standards? I feel like that's a boiled down way to say what you just said. And so I think, would you like Rose to give her position first?
I'm easy. However, this isn't necessarily a debate, but
Yeah,
it'll
I'm not trying to make it that way, but
it'll probably have like at least some of those aesthetics. Either way, I'm gonna try to maintain logic and composure and not be as much of a cunt as I could be, because that's way off the cunt scale. So
you set the bar, don't you?
Yeah, right.
No, my associate, like my position is basically that we should not automatically judge people by who they may or may not be connected to, and that we should not, accuse people of holding certain positions unless we have very good evidence that they do. Because one, you end up with word inflation. Like if you accuse someone of being a Nazi, and it happens enough times, and they're not, people stop listening when you call someone a Nazi. Like, this is like, I mean, I'll admit, like, even my knee-jerk response when someone calls someone else a Nazi is like, yeah, right, we've all heard that a million times. It's probably bullshit. And also, that's a great way to, I mean, it also is effectively slander if it's not true. Like, that's a great way to damage someone's reputation. I mean, this is a serious accusation, and serious accusations require serious evidence.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, so I sort of, I was saying this in the chat, and while in the chat, I sort of came to Rose's side more often than I came to Jeremy's. The reason, and I hope that I explained this well enough in my voice message, Jeremy, but let me rephrase it. The reason that I tend to come to Rose's side in issues like this is because my natural tendency, my neutral state, is to have I've been told often that I have too high standards for most things. That, like, basically, I'm the kind of person that, like, 100% meet the standard. If you associate with Nazis and you don't, call them out or stuff like that, then, that's on you, man. Like, you're obviously one of them. That sort of thing. Like, I totally get where you're coming from. My problem with that stance is that it's holding people to a standard that is unrealistic. On the internet, especially on the internet, it is very easy to associate with people who in real life you would punch if you saw. You know what I mean? Like, if easy to associate. I'm trying to think about how to phrase this. There is a massive pool of people out there with appalling opinions, stances, and everything, and a ton of them overlap with other spheres, especially the libertarian sphere. And in this case, my issue with the whole debate about how we should handle it is that if you don't have not just sufficient evidence, but easily accessible evidence, it's the accessibility, I think, that is the most important, then you're not going to achieve anything other than your own ostracization and another plank in the wall of their fortification of their position, the person you're trying to call out. Because everybody who tries to call them out and is, whether justly or not, shown to be, untrustworthy by their audience is just more reinforcement of what they say. So if you make these accusations and they aren't receptible to the people who are on the fence in their audience, then you're going to push them to that side of the fence, their side of the fence, if that makes any sense. And but otherwise, like I wish that we could hold these people to the maximum possible standard, to make them say whether or not they support this shit and to stick to those statements or to be ostracized. But I'm not in charge of the internet, and nobody is, because it's a conglomerate. You know what I mean? It's a million different people interacting together all at once. So I can't hold everyone to those standards, and I've got to find some kind of compromise range if I want to actually get a message out there, is my position.
I'll let Rose reply to that, give any amount of of sort of additional reinforcement to that point, and then I'll sort of respond to the items in those points that I think most accurately sort of sum up my objections.
Oh, no, you can go ahead because, yeah, I mean, I feel like you already said pretty much what I would have.
All right. So,
Sorry.
the first thing is that I'll say, all right, so those of you who have followed me for a significant period of time know that I have gone against some rather unsavory people. And here's a real strong example that I can express in two examples. An example of a subset, and in order to sort of repeat, express a repeated pattern, two things that apply to that subset. So, the first thing that I can say is the Riley situation. Anybody who's been following me for any length of time has probably at least heard the name. Now, who was Riley? Riley is a pedophile who was somewhat common in libertarian circles because libertarian circles liked his persona. They liked the fact that he seemed to be an innocent person on the side of helping people liberate from the state to a certain extent, right? Most people just probably followed back because that's how a lot of these circles operate. We'll join a massive follow train, and that person will see the follow train and be a part of it, and then a bunch of people who had no idea who this person was are suddenly following them. And most that's a significant problem on its own, and it's a problem I helped perpetuate early on in libertarian circles, basically. But effectively, the sort of topic of Riley really came to a crystallized head when I came out with what I called the Riley video. And this was a compilation of a bunch of evidence that I had already come out with that proved Riley as a pedophile, and that proved that not only is Riley a pedophile, but is trying to infiltrate libertarian circles and make them more pedophile friendly, right? And I posted this, and I kept on keeping up the evidence, and I got blackballed from so many places. And the reason that I'm saying this is that's example one, right? But most people in these circles, they haven't heard of Riley. They don't fucking care. Because it's not a part of their wheelhouse. Fine. Okay. So they're not going to oppose Riley because they don't know who this piece of shit is. But then it comes to more popular figures. And for instance, we can talk about the curious case of Thaddeus Russell. And the fact that Thaddeus Russell used to berate his college students and ask them questions about their views on age of consent, and make really uncomfortable topics of discussion for them in classrooms about what kinds of interactions professors should be able to have with students, to put it in a way. He directly told me that I am a disgusting imperialist if I say that it's a bad thing for a 13-year-old girl to have sex with her professor for better grades. He defended Roman Polanski, who drugged and raped a minor. And he also had a professor on Stephen Kirshner, where they both basically downplayed and minimized the effect of adult-child sex and celebrated it as something that should be more accepted. Stephen Kirshner, who wrote an entire book saying that adult-child sex is actually not that big a deal, bro. And after all of this, that sort of situation boiled over. Bob Murphy, noted based economist, had plenty to say on that subject. Hello, Hody. And so basically, this is another example of the sort of discrepancy here. When I brought up all of this information and also his appearance on Clint Russell's show to explain himself, where he came to the conclusion, the awesome conclusion, that you should be able to, as a community of adults, decide when a child is ready to have sex with adults. That's terrible. That's really fucking bad. And it's like, it was about the individual. So it's basically like you undergo your child tribunal for when you're like not childish enough that we can justify adults having sex with you. That's despicable and monstrous. And so I brought up all of this and more, and I read his article defending Roman Polanski for the Daily Beast. And I did all of this, and I made a video about it, really highly detailing it on a channel that I promise will actually be getting more content, but I keep saying that and then not fucking doing it, so my bad. Hate with Harding. Y'all can go check out Hate with Harding if you want to watch the video in question. But the thing that I'm bringing this up for is this is two people in a bracket of subsets. I could continue listing more, and like Rose knows some of the examples that I could bring up. You know, Hody knows some of the examples I could bring up. Like, this is a routine problem, and it's not just this one. And so when I'm bringing up these issues in my circles here, I could give them a really strong video, like defending my points. I could delineate everything. I could include source material. I could include screenshots. I could include video clips of him and this other professor, Stephen Kirshner, giddily laughing about adult-child sex. And you know how many libertarians gave a fuck? Basically zero. And so we're dealing with a culture that is resilient to criticism. And I'm not saying that, like, you know, the Republican and Democrat and mainstream cultures are so fucking awesome at accepting criticism, because they aren't. But, like, there's very little point in terms of energetic expenditure, in my view, to make really compelling cases before just calling somebody out and criticizing them. And it doesn't seem that it helps unity much for, like, these strong cases to be built if the vast majority of, like, libertarians don't give a fucking shit about the facts even when they're laid out. Before we get into responses, because I guarantee both of you have responses, Hody, introduce.
Oh, hi guys. I'm Hody Johns. I'm Jeremy's friend. I am a theology major. I love religious studies, and I am a part of the liberty/anarchy movement. And the state is often really not cool, and I think religious people would be better off without it. That's me.
Cool. And Rose and William, you two can respond, and then I'll get Hody's feedback on what he came in on with, which is like, I can see the facial expression. It's like eyes wide shut. What the fuck did I walk in on? Yeah. Go ahead.
Bit of a dumpster fire. Like, okay, I think in these particular cases, I mean, yeah, it sounds like you really did your, investigation and had like actual evidence that, proving that these people were guilty of the things you accused them of. But, okay, so some background. I've been involved in, the New York Libertarian Party for a couple of years now. And then the national, and then I've only, recently gotten involved in national, but I mean, I've been in these circles for years. In any event, so this election cycle, we've been, for the past 2 years, there's been all this speculation on who's going to be the LP party nominee. First we thought it was going to be Dave Smith. Then, he announced he wasn't running. So then the Mises Caucus was scrambling to find someone to be their candidate. Other factions of the party were doing the same. Yeah, most people think it's going to be Chase Oliver, but then I guess Lars also has a heavily funded campaign. But in any event, I'd heard references here and there to this Toad guy, but okay. But that's just it. Like, I'd heard a few references to him and people saying, this guy's a candidate and look how bad he is. But, like, at no point in any of my libertarian circles had I ever, like, heard anyone so much as mention this guy. Like, this was purely an online thing. Like, I'd heard people, like, or I'd seen people in groups complaining, oh, this is who's representing the Libertarian Party. And I thought it was weird because I'm like, who the hell is this guy and why is he supposedly our presidential candidate? Like, he's never been mentioned at, party meetings. He's never, he did not come to, our debates. Apparently he's been to a couple of them because like different state parties have different rules for who they allow on the debate stage. Some have much higher standards and others, they'll let just about anybody who claims they're a candidate be present.
He identifies as a candidate, so it's...
Right. He claims he is, but basically first I've heard of it. So in any event, so recently Jeremy was shared a video that he made, and it took me a couple days before I even watched it. But in any event, okay, this may piss some people off, but I watched it and I admit I laughed because I've been a troll on the internet before. I've been 14 years old and just trying to piss people off by saying the most offensive shit I could possibly come up with just to watch people get wound up. And so, I watched this and I'm like, okay, this guy is clearly just trying to say the most offensive shit he possibly can because he enjoys watching the fallout from it. So, I mentioned in a chat, I'm like, this guy is obviously a troll who's trying to engagement farm and he's, running a presidential campaign as, for the purpose of self-promotion. And because, so he's going to say super offensive shit. It gets him followers. It gets people laughing. It gets people calling him based. And, so that did not go over very well because then, we were talking and Jeremy mentioned that he has some high-profile supporters. And then we disagreed on what exactly constitutes a supporter. And now here we are.
Oh, William, you gotta... Oh, sorry, Appalachian. I did that every stream. I'm gonna try to find a way to bleep that out.
Dude, I honestly, I don't care, man. William is a very common name. But anyway,
I promised I wouldn't, though. I try to be a man of my word, and then I just completely fucking...
Well, it's my fault for coming up with two incredibly long words to be my quote-unquote name. But anyway, what's funny is that I started responding. I was like, hey, Rose, let me pick up the thread, but I was muted. I had myself fucking muted. Anyway, so let me pick up from where Rose left off and give my side of the rebuttal. So I see three things here at issue. One, the two cases, correct me if I'm wrong, but the two cases that you listed earlier, Jeremy, those were specifically pedo cases, correct? Both of them?
Oh, I'm just using, yes, and just to be clear...
No, I know,
I could list... so the reason I'm starting with those as obvious examples is most people who were connected to those people didn't stop being connected even afterward. Even going
which is condemnable.
Even going so far as to, Mr. Dapperton fundraised for the pedo Riley... because his trailer burnt down and he didn't like me.
Yeah. All right. So I feel like my first point is this. There is an identifiable difference between something such as being a pedophile and the allowable amount of association with someone who is a pedophile and still be considered not a supporter, and something such as, say, fascism or Nazism and stuff like that. And the reason I say that is because I feel like things like being a pedophile are in a completely different category akin to murder, rape, and other things that are completely unacceptable for almost every single human being on the planet. You get my drift? While things such as extreme right-wing beliefs, obviously they are not good, they are not quite as inflammatory and thus not quite as condemnable as the outright crimes that are pedophilia and rape and murder and things like that. So just because one case of association is damnable, for instance, the one that you were just saying, that does not mean that another case of association that does not involve pedophilia accusations would be as damnable.
Is Nazism not a crime?
I mean, Nazism is an ideology. practicing Nazism is a crime. But pedophilia is always a crime. Even like the concept of pedophilia in and of itself is a mental disorder. But we should not err in classifying bad ideologies as mental disorders, because that's how we get to our own special form of pharmaceutical fascism, is by claiming anything we disagree with is a mental disorder. You know what I mean?
Well,
So
sure.
like there has to be room for the ends of the spectrum. We don't have to agree with them, but there has to be room for there to be some, like, Venn diagram overlap. You can be on one side, you can be on the other, but there is a gradient that leads us from one side to the other, and there has to be a point where you're leaned on one side, but you're not lost. If that makes any sense. I'm not. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Can you be a mentally healthy advocate of Nazism?
Huh?
Can you be a mentally healthy advocate of Nazism?
Personally, I don't think you can be.
Healthy.
Yeah, personally, I don't think that you can be a mentally healthy person who advocates for any form of statism. Yeah, like that's a whole nother question. But that's what I mean. It's like I don't agree with how we view mental health in the modern world as it is. So we shouldn't use that as a smear against our political opponents. We should argue them on their basis, saying that the things they want are obviously wrong for these universally recognizable reasons, etc.
It's not a universally recognizable reason to say that Nazism is condemnable?
Yeah, no, it is. That's what I'm saying. It's like we can argue against Nazism on universally recognizable principles that don't include things like calling it mental illness or outright saying that it is as bad as direct violence, if that makes any sense. I am against tankies as much as I am against Nazis for the exact same reasons. But if I see someone who says they're a Nazi in real life and says, yeah, I would support Nazism if it was put in tomorrow, are you going to do anything about it? No, I'm not going to do anything about it. But if it was put in tomorrow, I would support it. I'd be like, all right, well, you're a piece of shit. I'm not going to physically hurt you right now, but I'm fucking watching you, and you're ostracized from everything that I have control over. You see what I mean?
So
right. I wouldn't associate with them, but like if they have shitty ideas but haven't actually acted on them yet, like there's a difference between people who have, actually done something and people who just have shitty ideas that as of, yet are still just exist only in their head.
So they're just threatening genocide, and the fact that they haven't engaged.
Not.
It is. That's what Nazism is.
Okay, so it is the hypothetical support of a genocidal regime. That is not okay, and we can all agree that it's not okay. But it is not equivalent to committing the genocide. The people who committed the genocide are worse than the people who supported them, but both are unacceptable. Does that make sense?
Well, okay, so two questions, and then like after your response, because I don't want to like have the last word here and like have bad vibes, but so after your response, we'll move to Hody and he can give his thoughts so far. So I'm not equating supporting the genocide with the genocide itself, but without genocide supporters, you don't get genocide. Without Nazi supporters, you can't have a successful Nazi movement, and you can't have the Nazi government engage in a Nazi genocide, which means that the support is a plank of the power to do the action. And what it also means is that given the historical precedent, it's a credible threat of violence to say that you're a Nazi and that you advocate and are trying actively to emplace a government which would commit violence against the common person toward Nazi ends. And in doing so, in supporting not only the violence, but the censorship, the eugenics, the sort of the breach of like any sort of free market principles, the attack on religious freedom, the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of these things mean that somebody like that, to me, is like automatically saying that they support any sort of action that I could take against them being done to other people. And given the fact that they're trying actively to build this world, to me, what that means is I'm not wrong at all for taking whatever kinds of actions necessary it is to hand them bouquets of flowers, because we've seen how Nazism has gone before, and we should take all measures available to prevent it from happening again, especially since the current global order was the one who not only generated the Nazis to begin with, but also helped export them after the war, because they were protecting their investment and they never actually opposed them. The Nazis still have power. The Nazis are still very well replete. It's why you couldn't talk about the Nazis in Ukraine, because, the U.S. government has been funding Ukrainian Nazis since the late 40s. It's why I get called a massive, I get called an insane person or a commie or whatever when I share my article where I painstakingly detailed, again, another thing where I painstakingly detailed the Nazi problem, and still, after all of that, and a battering ram, a giant wall of bibliography of all my sources cited, most people won't even read that to begin with, much less, tell me anything positive about it once they do. And the reason I'm bringing all this up is because this is how they start. This is how they build their forces. This is how they muster their army for their Reich, is because they'll get to the point where they've got enough people who say, nah, it's just jokes, or nah, it's just ideas, man. Do you hate free speech? And all these sorts of people writing on liberal values that they actually fundamentally hate. And when you get down to that brass tacks situation, these people don't care about this kind of civility. And I think it's sometimes counterproductive to offer it to them. And I'll leave it to you, and then we can go to Hody immediately after you. And then Rose.
Okay.
And then me again.
All right, I will try to keep my comments short. I completely see where you're coming from, but how do I phrase this? Yes, I agree. Nazism, if left unchecked, if left ignored, will absolutely take root and regrow because the seeds are still in the soil. They were never gotten rid of. The problem is that almost every bad idea that humans have ever come up with, the seeds are still inside the soil, brother. It's not just Nazism. It's all sorts of tyrannical totalitarianism, and totalitarianism by any other name will always spread itself among those who are allowed to be weak-minded. My response to that is that every single time an ineffectual attack on a person who would fall into the category of the vanguard fascists, who are not openly fascists but spreading it's just jokes, the real it's just jokes fascists like Stone Toss. Every time that an ineffectual criticism is leveled at them, the more of their audience is confirmed as Nazis. Every time an effectual criticism is leveled at them, more of their audience is turned away from Nazism. And so the only kind of criticism that is worth throwing at these people is the kind that sticks in the minds of their audience. And you might say, well, we've lost their audience, but if you live by that credo, then you've already lost unity, because at the end of the day, there are just as many people on the left saying we've lost the entire right as there are on the right saying we've lost the entire left. It's sectarianism by any other name. And if you commit to this idea that their audiences are lost causes, we might as well not try to win them over, then what are we even doing? You know what I mean?
I can see where you're coming from, and I have responses, but I'm going to follow the order I just stated.
Yes.
Got to be a man of my word.
What do you think? What does God think about it?
Believe it or not, God's not big on Nazism.
I'm shocked.
The one thing that God hates worse than pagan, heathen, whatever, is people using his name in vain and people flying his banner and saying, oh, here's what happened. Here's what God thinks, and God says, kill all the Jews.
Tables when you do that.
Yeah, that's when tables start getting flipped. So really the issue for here, I don't think there is going to be a single principled thing to do person to person, because I think we just have to handle this for me, I would call it the Holy Spirit, but I would tell any other person, just use your conscience. Like, what is it that do you feel you can reach this person? We've had times you interact with a Nazi and it makes them less of a Nazi. And that's great. We've had times when you interact with a Nazi, you try your best, and it amplifies their voice and makes them look good. And obviously, we want to avoid that. So there's not like a do cut out of your life, don't cut out of your life. Some people are great Daryl Davis models, hang out with the KKK, spend time with them, befriend them, get them a new community, have them give you their hood, have them realize they err their ways after a long friendship. Not everybody's got that kind of patience, time, and frankly, just temperament and mentality. And so some people you just have to cut out of your life. I have a few people who I am friends with, despite views that are flatly reprehensible. I had a friend, this was actually years ago, but who actually sold weapons to Hamas and got caught. The FBI called me because they're like, hey, you were friends with this guy. Now, obviously, anybody who knows me, I'm peace, more peace, drizzle it in peace, drink another gallon of peace, and then when you think you can't have any more peace, fit some more peace in there. So there's obviously, it's nothing that I had told this guy, but there's things that I wish I had told him. I wish that I had gotten through to him sooner. And I take that lesson, I bring it forward when I talk to other people who are flirting with this kind of idea. Now, in the case of
real quick, are you talking about Teeter?
No.
Okay, so that's just another person. Never mind.
It's sad. I mean, there are multiple people. Obviously, we're anti-imperialists.
I wanted to know if we knew the same terrorist sympathizer.
Yeah, it's dang it, it's a different one. No, I knew it. There was the one guy who claimed to be the Dallas Sniper. We've had all kinds of wackies in the anarchist movement. And speaking of which, that means you get people like Toad. Now, here's the warning that I have for people like Toad. 5 years ago, people would be like, oh yeah, nationalism. And Christians would be like, we're not that. Oh my gosh, I have to say, no, we're not nationalists all the time. It's so stupid. Christian nationalism is so dumb. And now you got just, Trump Bibles. You have literally Congress people who will get on stage and be like, I'm a Christian nationalist. And everybody goes, yay. So what happens at first is people are like, oh, why do I have to keep denying this? And I've talked about this before on the show, but what we want to see from these people is a distance from this subject. One of the reasons the makers of South Park or Family Guy are able to make some of the jokes that Toad can't is because we know what side they're on. And so when you have an established, I really don't like bigotry or Nazism side and everybody knows it, it's just patently obvious, then if you make a pro-Nazi joke, everybody's like, oh my gosh, that's so ridiculous. Peter Griffin's an idiot. So when Peter Griffin says something, you're not to take him seriously, right? We can still laugh at the joke. You can people are like, oh, in this era, you can't tell any comedy. People still tell Jew jokes. They still tell gay jokes. They still tell black jokes. They still tell all kinds of jokes. They still jokes against Christians and atheists and anything you want. The idea is we have to know that you're an ally before you do this. If you're a friend, you can still tell all these jokes. Yeah. So when we have somebody get up there who's like, well, I'm just joking, and Jeremy, you and I had interactions with him, and he was like, well, the white power part was just a joke. But and so I was like, oh, was this whole thing a joke? So you said unironically, but you really meant the whole thing ironically? Well, obviously, at that point, he clammed up because, of course, the whole thing wasn't ironic. He meant a lot of what he was saying. It's just up to me to try and parse out what he did and didn't mean. And I'm not going to do that. And the problem is when you make these jokes, a lot of times you're doing the Julius Caesar. You're testing the waters. You're like, maybe.
Exactly.
Maybe get away with it until finally, in the case with modern Christianity and nationalism, people don't blink an eye now. 5 years ago, nationalism, we'd never do that. But now we are. And so these
are the
kinds
read
of things
Andrew Torba's book? It's my new Bible. I read it more than the other one now. Go
Killing
ahead.
me.
Yeah, he's just describing the Schrodinger's douchebag phenomenon. Like someone will, like they'll say something, then if people get pissed at them, they'll be like, "Oh, it was just joking. Why do you guys have no sense of humor?" People agree, then yeah, it was serious. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up Daryl Davis because I actually have encountered people who will condemn Daryl Davis for even associating with people they don't like, even though he's actively converting. I mean, he's probably done more to convince people not to be KKK members than these people have ever done in their lives. But I guess that's kind of my point. Like, at what point? Like, I mean, because if someone saw, him interacting with someone who had not yet renounced their position in the KKK, like they may say, "Oh, well, this guy, he's being friendly with him." That indicates, though, that he's not actively condemning this guy. That indicates he might be a supporter of his. So I guess that's kind of what I take issue with, the idea that, like, positive interactions with someone necessarily indicate that you are supporting or endorsing the majority of their views, or even just some of their views.
So
I mean,
go
ahead.
No. Hey, you got more to say.
Not really. Not at the moment.
All right. Well, so what I'll say to that is this. First off, if any of these people want to talk, I'm down. Like, I have been, like, on shows of people I disagree with. I have been in chat rooms with people I disagree with. Please, for the love of fuck, nobody be exactly like me. I am corrosive. I am mentally ill. I have voices in my head. We have arguments in here. It is not pleasant, I can assure you, especially when certain ones of them win. So let me just be super clear here and say, I am not the model citizen. Holy shit. My room is even cluttered right now, and I need to clean that shit up. You are looking at a snapshot of my life. It's like Instagram, where it's like a snapshot of your life, and it's like chaos in the background, but like, you look at this thing and it's like through a nice filter, and so you don't know that they constantly think about killing themselves, it's that. But like, my point isn't that I'm perfect, that please fucking don't be exactly like me. I am not. But like, the thing is, at the same time, most of these people aren't willing to have that conversation. Most of these people aren't willing to have the conversation about their own imperfections. Most of these people aren't even willing to talk to me to begin with. Jacob Winograd went out on a fucking limb. My internet fucked up. Jacob Winograd went out on a fucking limb by having me on his show. Like, that is an insane move in these circles, to have me on your program, to positively associate with me at all. I am like a flashpoint for a bunch of people's vile shit, and I also have, like, a long history of going against people. So a whole lot of people are going to falsely accuse me of various things, and also try to associate me with irrationality. They do a lot of the same sort of things to me that, like, I am then told to not do to them. And sure, maybe, like, I shouldn't be, like, sink to their level. And I'm not, precisely on a fucking high horse myself either. I've got a laundry list of issues. And please, again, nobody be me. There can be only one insane schizo, like, perpetually negative fucking psychotic piece of shit. So please, don't think that I'm saying that everybody suddenly has to be a carbon copy. Nobody should even try. I am not a good source of, like, calm or, like, approachability, or even most of the time building coalitions, and I'm trying to work on that. But at the same time, like, these people freeze me out. They blackball me. They'll lie about me a lot of the time. They'll spend a whole lot of time concocting shit to, like, disagree with me, like, based on bullshit rather than based on facts. They'll defend liars if those liars are against me, like Toad defending David Corbo, when he lied about Jewish slave boats having been, like, the people who dropped his grandmother off here in like, Ecuador or something. And, like, these people, he Toad specifically said that, like, he made a pirate joke, and he said that the pirates moved the eye patch to the top of their head. We still know who owned the slave boats. And I had just proven conclusively by talking to people from the country, by talking to historians, by talking to people who spoke the language, by talking to people who knew what the fuck they were talking about, that David Corbo was a liar. Basically, nobody had gone to that extent yet to prove that he was a liar. But he was, and Toad still defended him. And it's because Corbo is affiliated through his, I think it's like Anti-Nephilim Action podcast. Like, he knows the Tower Gang podcast, who knows, like, this, like, the Dave Smith crowd, who knows all of these other people. And through their associations and building, like, a loosely connected series of webs of communications and positive interactions and, you know, being connected to people like Ryan Dawson and Jake Shields.
Yeah, you get him? You got too close to the truth, man.
Yeah. So being like close to people like Ryan Dawson and Jake Shields and Matt Wallace and, you know, there's that guy who's like Dom Luker and, you know, Elon Musk and, you know, all of these sort of Yarvin, Land, all of these people who suddenly you're affiliated with these people, Daniel McAdams, and you're in with the Liberty crowd. And these people can say absolutely tyrannical shit, like Daniel McAdams being like, I love Putin, and being one of the people who is like, you know, if you get Scott Ritter, this twice convicted child predator, pro-war, pro-Russia guy, to not speak at the rally, you'll never get Ron Paul again. Maybe that's a reasonable exchange if Ron Paul is going to force his name to be attached to that shit. You know, maybe we should start to be like, yeah, you know, I'm good, yo. And, like, if these people do want to talk, I'm still down to talk. Let's talk. Let's talk about why certain things might be acceptable and not be acceptable. Have me on your show. I will defend myself to the, like, rabid pack of wolves. But, like, the thing is, like, they won't do that. They're not interested in the discourse for the vast majority of cases. It takes a serious set of balls to have me on your program. It takes a serious set of balls to be like, I'm going to support this guy even though y'all don't, because the reasons I have are sound in my own mind. You know? It's like that. And because of that and so many other factors, and because I've been watching this web slowly build over all these years, I just can't have confidence that it's going to be any better going forward if I'm just a little bit nicer to these people, or if I take a different approach. And, like, it's compounded by the amount of times that I've built a really strong, extremely thorough and stable case, only for that to be ignored, for me to be mocked, for me to be the new subject of lies, of ridicule, etc., and blackballed in these circles, despite the fact that I have ironclad proof of a lot of this shit. So it's like, you know, I would love it if I could just build an extremely solid case and people would follow suit. But, like, Stone Toss, great example. And I'll shut up after this, and then William, Rose, and Hody. But, like, Stone Toss had a dossier built on him. An absolute raging cavalcade of facts over feelings. And the conservative crowd was just like, hey, thanks for telling us who this based individual is. They don't give a shit. They don't fucking care.
Of course they don't give a shit.
Or they just have heard the word Nazi so many times that they don't give a shit anymore. So, again, I think it's word inflation. Also, today I learned I have more balls than most of the people in my libertarian circles.
Literally.
So let me actually say something about Stone Toss. So I have been aware of Stone Toss since probably Red Panels. I think I originally found Red Panels. What was that, like 2015 or so? I can't remember exactly, but I found both of those, and I was absolutely one of the people who found it and didn't immediately sniff out the fascism. I thought that a lot of his comics were funny. and accurate. And the ones that were obviously, you know, a tip towards the fascism side, I read because I had been on 4chan and Poll for years and knew that community, but I didn't know the why can I not pronounce this word right now? You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. Yeah, I couldn't tell how legitimate it was. Over time, I came to the conclusion that it was 100% legitimate because you can only do so many dog whistles before, you know, a pack shows up. And the unironic support of Poll, whom I've long ago, like, I think I've said this to Jeremy before, but like in the past, I was more sympathetic towards the right than I was towards the bottom. And that has been something that I have grown about over time. And so in that time that I've grown, I've seen the place that I originally was, I guess, introduced to more right-leaning ideas go harder and harder right. I realized that, like, you know, this stuff doesn't make sense, but I can see it in other things, right? Like I could recognize it. And so when I saw that in Stone Toss, it's not like I never looked at him again. It's that, like, I know now he's a Nazi. Okay, well, I know his lens. I know where he's coming from. I can read his jokes, and I can even laugh at them because I get the point of them. But that doesn't mean that I, in any way, shape, or form, agree with what he supports. I don't give him I don't like his shit on Facebook. I don't give him support. I just see him, and I know it moves by. But what I do know is that there are a lot of people like me who could be his fans, who could be converted because I was one. So I guess I don't really give a fuck how you treat the dudes who are the names in charge of this shit. I don't care about the podcasts. I don't care about the people, because in essence, I am simply a man who lives in the woods. I really couldn't give a fuck about any of those people. But the millions of people who take their cues, their ideas, and their philosophy from them, those are the people that it matters about. And the only way we get those people is by finding a way to make the truth more palatable. Because if it's not palatable, they're not going to eat it. You and I both know that. And, like, I'm a fucking weirdo. I love looking into all sorts of weird shit, and that's how I ended up becoming an anarchist, because I looked at books that no one else would read, and I said, yeah, fuck it, I'll read it. It's 70 hours of American history, whatever. You know, and I found out that, you know, all sorts of interesting information. But, like, not everybody's like that. You gotta find a way to make the truth palatable if you ever want to win those people over, because there are plenty of good people who've been misled by bad ideas that sound nice on paper, just like every other form of totalitarianism.
Right. I mean, and can I also just add that, okay, most people are not perpetually online. Like, you'd be amazed how many people, you know, think that Stone Toss comics are funny, but have no idea who Stone Toss even is. Like, they just, you know, they see it shared to some meme group and then they reshare it. Like, not only do they not know who he is, they don't know the name of the person who makes the comics. They have no idea what his political views are, even though this has been, you know, common knowledge for years now for those of us who are kind of in these circles. Again, most people are not. So, yeah, like, yelling at someone because they shared a comic that they thought was funny because, you know, it was made by a Nazi, like, that's just going to make people say, oh, you can't just call everyone a Nazi. Like, most of the time they don't listen.
So let me come back against that, Rose, from Jeremy's side and say this. There is absolutely a point where you need to cut that shit out. Like, I don't ever want to be misconstrued by saying that it's acceptable to post, share, or otherwise, like, push forward his stuff once you have been made aware of it. So if somebody like Jeremy shows up and you have the time to read his posts before you block him, that means that you know what he said is true, which means that if you still continue to post and share Stone Toss, well, like, you have a platform. You are advocating for someone and you've been shown what they believe and you continue, well, that in itself is evidence and is condemnable. I absolutely see that case. But there's also the situation where you have less condemnable actions, such as, like, going on a podcast, which, like, literally, I don't even know. I don't even know how going on any podcast could be shown as support at least once or twice. But, like, if you're a regular guest, if they know you by your first name, if, you know, you have in-jokes, brother, you support them. No matter what you say, you support them. You see what I mean? There has to be a line but there definitely is one. It may be like a gray area, but there is definitely one side of the line where it's like, that's innocent, that's acceptable. There's the other side of the line where it's like, brother, there ain't no fucking way you didn't know what you were doing. You know what I mean?
I mean, I have in-jokes with people whose philosophies I find, terrible. Look at the group I help run, like, for God's sake.
Well, yeah.
I have to be able to get along, and be cordial with people at the very least.
Yeah, I know. I meant like as a
right. Yeah. No, I know
I
know what you're getting at, but like I need to see actual evidence that you agree with certain stances before I'll accuse you of holding those stances. Like simply being, loosely connected to someone, that's just not enough for me. And certainly not, responding to something that they tweeted at you with a GIF comment or like appearing on their podcast the day after someone else appeared on their podcast. I'm sorry, that just doesn't do it for me.
I think the best way to say it is what Hody said. It's got to be your own conscience sort of thing. And I don't know. Do you have anything to say, Hody?
Yeah, I mean you're doing a great job. I mean I think in the case of how we judge sin, it's the results, right? Like a good seed can't have bad fruit, and a bad seed won't have good fruit, So like, if you're doing, so like whatever course of action you take, the purpose of a system is what it does, right? If the course of action that you take, it results in that person being less of a bigot or less of a, let's just say authoritarian, all collectivism, right? Like authoritarian collectivism. Is if it results in them having less of that or receiving pushback against that, everybody clearly knows your stance as opposed to theirs. Fantastic. I am friends. We'll go ahead and talk about Jacob specifically. I'm not about him, but I'll use him as an example. Everybody knows that my point of view is radically different from his. Now, we are still friends. I still try to reach him. We still talk. We have disagreements.
Right.
Been on each other's shows. And I view when he's wrong as very serious. It's a very bad thing, but everybody knows where I stand on it. And I get more people showing up to being like, man, I thought when I was a Christian, I actually had to be like anti-gay and stuff. I had seen these seven Bible verses regurgitated over and over. I didn't know. Thank you so much for going on a show, talking with him, whatever. I'll absolutely do that. Even if 90% of his audience is like, this guy, get him out of here. For the 10% that goes, well, either outright says like, hey, let me be part of the Love First Christians. I'm tired. I'm done with this, and then, or part of the ones that go, I didn't know that before. Let me think about it for a little bit. Because that's honestly the more common experience. And yet there are also kinds where I just got to go, nope, I got to cut him off right away. A good example there would be Jeremy Kaufman. With his, and I was talking with a friend of his, and they're like, oh, everybody hates him, but he doesn't mean anything he says. And I'm like, so he's not actually racist? And they were like, well, yeah, he's racist, but like, ordinarily he's just like, most of it he's like joking about, and he's not like really serious about. And it's like, okay, but like, don't you think it's important for people to kind of know the racist part? Like, we need some pushback on that. And when I talk with Jeremy, and he'll be like, hey guys, honest question, give me the best evidence you've got that race science is like bogus. And I, like Jeremy, I've done this too, put in hours, got together a list, looked at the studies he likes to use, talk about why they got debunked, looked at the data, explained it all, gone through it, and he just won't respond. And he kept doing this, and I pasted this like thing, big essay, all kinds of links, like 3 or 4 times, no response. What he will argue with is, you bigot ass Nazi, like GTFO the libertarians. And he will engage with those people. He only wants the rage. Like he only wants that type of thing. He doesn't want, like Jacob wants an actual interaction and debate. Jeremy doesn't want that. Jeremy's like identity is tied up in his racism. And so there's no way for me to reach him. Now, I'm not saying Jeremy is unreachable. I believe in atonement for everybody. I believe in salvation for everybody. Maybe the person who reaches him is going to be Jesus, but maybe the person who reaches him is going to be his mom or his sister or somebody who already has inroads with him. I'm not the right person because for me, I come from a very like left brain, like, here's some data. like, here it is. He's coming from like a white identitarian thing, and that's not something I'm very good at reaching. So like, it's just not a job for me. And like what you guys were talking about earlier, there's just we kind of gotta establish what's the job for you to do in this kind of situation. And it depends. Go ahead.
So, all right, general responses. The first response I have is this. I'm not condemning literally everyone who, like, engages with content. I'm not condemning literally everyone who engages with shows. But what I am saying is there's a certain point at which you have to observe the behavioral patternal similarities between what you're looking at and the duck and say that if it walks like one and quacks like one, it's a duck. And there's a certain point at which you can duck label something, at which it becomes duck-like enough that you can say that's a duck. And when enough similarities between two people come up, even if the other party doesn't have 100% verisimilitude with the duck, you can at least say that they are duck adjacent. You can at least say that they are, amicable toward the ducks. And you can at least say that they would be a very good friend to the ducks in certain duck-like circumstances. And so when I'm saying what I'm saying this for is to like really emphasize the fact that I'm not saying everybody associated with these things is like 0% chance of success. You are gone forever. You are forever condemned. You have been judged by the court of the hedgehog, and you shall be slow forever. My point is to say that, like, these people have a cultural issue, and we should be able to highlight and understand that, and we should be able to condemn what we can see of it that is similar enough. And when it comes down to these people, I'm not saying necessarily, specifically, that because they, like, share in enough, like, podcast, like, they appear on the same podcast enough times. I'm saying that combined with the fact that they have similar views on trans people, combined with the fact that they have similar views on the border and immigration, combined with the fact that they have a similar view on the paleo strategy qua Rothbard and Hoppe, combined with the fact that they are similarly comfortable with the Pinochet crowd or the Malay crowd in the modern context, that they have a similar view on religiosity or the lack thereof, that they have a similar enough view on, like, so many of these other things that I could mention, there comes a point at which you can say that they are similar enough that even if they don't share 100% verisimilitude in all of their respects, you've got, like, enough that you can say that there is a cultural problem and we should do something about it. And when I say this, what I'm not trying to do is say that these people are irredeemable and forever fucked. What I am trying to say, because that's not my job. My job is to say that these people are actively supporting the same kinds of culture that preceded genocide historically. And if you do that, especially if you do it under the guise of freedom, that's objectionable to me. Especially if you do it not only under the guise of freedom, but pure freedom. If you say, I'm an anarchist, but simultaneously, we should ban trans people, eradicate them from public existence. If you clapped along with Michael Knowles when he said that at CPAC, or if you're one of the many APAC, CPAC fucks who agree with him, if you're part of the Daily Wire audience and you're that sort of person, or you're, like, affiliated with the Daily Wire's content creation sphere, and you support various genocides anyway, like the one in Palestine, maybe that sort of cross-translates to why you're okay with the eradication of other sorts. Maybe all of these treating people as less than human and justifying massive statism is, like, sort of interconnected in certain other ways. And while there's certainly not a direct overlap between these audiences, there's enough that they have boosted each other in enough significant ways that if you point that out, you can be like, this is a cultural problem and it demands cultural solutions. And even if, like, hypothetically, you could say that I was incorrect about like certain people being supporters of other people because they didn't like directly say I support you, or I support this position you hold. If they get close enough and don't condemn the stuff that is allegedly different, supposedly, I don't know how I'm supposed to tell that. I don't know how I'm supposed to be like, you're one of the different ones if you won't set yourself apart. By your fruits you shall be known. And so, like, if these people want me to not think that they support these things, there's an easy way to do that, and it's, I don't support that shit. It's calling it out when somebody says white power at the end of their fucking libertarian screed for an official Libertarian Party event. It's saying, that guy's a fucking cunt, we don't stand. And it's really easy to do. And if the problem isn't that pervasive, you won't even have to do it that much. So if the problem is that pervasive, that it'd be like a so regular occurrence that I've got to oppose somebody for being Nazi adjacent, then it's real strong evidence that I was right. And if it's not, then it's at least evidence that I'm right, that they should stop being so adjacent to this shit so that they can actually set themselves apart and maybe from that platform not seem like a threat to minorities so that we can get some unity up in this bitch. I'll give Rose the floor, then Hody, then Appalachian.
Right. So basically, okay, what you're describing is, okay, there are people in circles who have a lot of overlap on certain issues. And, sometimes it's, based stuff like being anti-imperialist or anti-central banking. In other cases, yeah, it's like being anti-LGBT or at least, thinking that people who support the LGBT community are groomers or some bullshit like that. So I guess when there's people who have significant overlap in some areas, there's a high likelihood that they'll be open to the person's, ideas on other things. Like, you start following a particular person and you become more easily swayed by their ideas. So, yeah, I get that. I think that's a more nuanced position, though, than like, okay, so this guy is a supporter of this guy and I have proof. Here are some instances where he replied to him on Twitter. And also, yeah, they have views that kind of overlap, but like I've never heard this particular person say that he supports this guy's views on, thinking it's a good idea to say white power or, ethno-nationalism or some bullshit like that. I guess I just have kind of a knee-jerk response to this stuff because, okay, I'm involved with the Mises Caucus circles. So, like, a lot of people will, jump to conclusions and say, oh, well, because, a ton of them, do counterproductive shit like posting anti-trans memes on their Facebook pages. Therefore, you're likely to hold those same views. No, I'm aligned with this particular crowd because I agree with them on, being anti-Federal Reserve, anti-central banking, actually anti-war as opposed to just paying lip service while thinking that, NATO is a voluntary association or some other stupid shit that some of the more beltway type libertarians think. So, in addition, like, okay, I also think that, like, if I were to leave because I have some pretty strong disagreements, and I have, had some pretty strong disagreements with the people I associate with, I think that, like, if I were to leave, like, okay, if all the principled libertarians left, then, it would become a caucus of, just purely bigots or so. And I also think, we need people who are willing to continue to associate and try to make, a particular ecosystem better. And I also will say, like, I think, if someone asks me, okay, do you agree with this particular person on this issue? I'll tell them, no, I don't agree on that specific issue. But I also don't see any real reason to, like, get on social media just completely unprompted, be like, so I would like to condemn so-and-so for saying this. Because one, anyone who knows me knows what my views are. I don't feel the need to go, just go out of my way to condemn people on particular issues if I'm not creating drama, like, and making a public spectacle out of it. Just, I don't know. I think that's counterproductive. I think I should work on, trying to sway people. I think there are better ways to sway people towards the correct position.
My question for you, Rose, would be, so what do you find is effective for getting the libertarian, as you said, if you left, like, the bigots take over, right? Like, you and people like you, right?
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, I don't judge people who left because they concluded it was a lost cause. But, like, I mean, there's a lot that they're doing that I agree with. So, and unfortunately, there are no other currently viable factions of the Libertarian Party who are focused on things like, decentralization, running candidates for local office, and, not wasting time on things like ballot access and other lost causes. So again, I guess, I think it's, in some ways, I just have kind of a knee-jerk response to people, making snap judgments, saying, oh, you're involved in this particular circle, therefore you're likely to hold certain views that I find objectionable or therefore you support these people, or you agree with them and you support them for some reason, like on certain issues. So therefore that's an endorsement of everything else that they've ever said, things along those lines.
Just an olive branch real quick, and then Hody, please, I will shut the fuck up. Just as an olive branch, like, anyone who associates with me positively has been called a cultist. I'm running with the joke. I call myself a cult leader. I say I run a cult. I have weekly cult meetings. I don't... So, I understand. Like, and not only that, but I've been slandered in so many ways, not the least of which is being called a Nazi. By people who don't know me, never spoke to me, and a bunch of other shit. Yeah, imagine, like, because you know me, and
But you were an annoying leftist.
Yeah, right? Well, so I've been called...
No, you're clearly a Nazi. Nazi's leftism, remember?
I mean, if you're not being called far right and far left on the same day, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, and like, the thing... So, for instance, as an example, I was put on this list of Nazi furries maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and, like, they didn't ask me, they didn't look at my profile, they just put me on a list because of some associations. So I understand that, and I also specifically networked with certain other people on that list who weren't in fact Nazis, and we became friends, and we started to support each other's stuff. And it was actually a somewhat positive experience in some regards. I'm still friends with some of those people, who were not Nazis, but who were falsely maligned. And I've been, falsely accused of that. I defended somebody from, like, an angry leftist. So she fought, like, this kid she was bullying. And so she falsely accused me of being a groomer, and sent thousands of people after me, because, like, I was defending this kid from thousands of people as well, who were, like, falsely accusing him of shit because she said so. And, like, he was like on the verge of fucking suicide. He was very strongly just, this isn't what I signed up for. I signed up to help people. And I don't even think kids should be involved in circles like that to begin with. But I was like, this is how you're helping people? This is how you're progressively progressing things? And so I called her out, and she falsely called me a groomer with zero evidence, and only later on retracted that shit. So, like, I've been called a groomer by leftists with no evidence. I've been called a groomer by rightists with no evidence. I've been called a tanky by the right. I've been called a commie by the left. A Nazi by the left. I've been called everything. So I understand this whole, like, don't just buy guilt by association shit. I'm not, fucking saying that it never happens. I'm just, what I'm trying to do is find the best ways to actually prove this, and to understand that a lot of the time, even if you do prove it, people aren't going to care. Because, like, there are still some people out there who think I'm a Nazi because of that list. There's still some people out there who falsely believe the lies that she told, even though she publicly retracted them eventually after enough public pressure. And it's like, I understand that we have like run amok cults of personality and shit. I'm not remotely trying to say just believe shit. You know, just as an olive branch to your position, Rose, to make it not like overwhelmingly and just purely antagonistic. Just saying. Back to you, Hody.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So like my point, I guess, is with Rose, I just wonder at what point like you would say this isn't gonna, like, what are some signs that would make you say I don't think this is gonna work out? Like how bad would it have to, like, how bad does it have to get? You know?
I've said that to myself a bunch of times, and I'm like, you know what? I hate change, so I'll just hold out just a little bit longer. And part of it is just because I'm very indecisive. So like I'll say, you know what? This is, okay, if this happened, you know, I'm out. Then it happens. I'm like, you know, maybe I'll wait and see if it gets worse. Or, so to be honest, I don't honestly know. Okay, maybe like,
So if somebody unironically says, hey, listen, I'm a libertarian fascist. I believe in a libertarian fascist future. Well, would that be too much for you?
I mean, it has happened.
No, I meant like...
I was about to be like, that's
literally.
a trap. She's had people in her caucus say that, so like, don't.
Okay.
God damn, I
Not
hate
words.
libertarian.
We have had people fall down the pipeline. We've also had people from, weirdly enough, like in, you know, the New York chapter, it's actually been the more like conservative, right-leaning people who have left in droves all of a sudden.
RFK.
So no, they hate him.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But the Mises Caucus hates him too, including the non-conservative ones, or the less conservative ones. I mean, they hate him for the right reasons. I guess, okay, I mean, I guess theoretically you could be anti-Israel for the wrong reasons, but, like, they hate him for being, you know,
Here you go, Rose.
Fuck, what?
Let me ask you. No, I said, here you go. I have a good way to phrase the question. Let's say that the current leader of the New York Libertarian Party puts forward a plank that says that they unironically want to take the right away from women to work because freedom for women means being in the kitchen. Do you think, like, unironically, like in the plank, he's like, for the whole party, this is what I want, and everybody agrees. Do you think that would be enough for you to be like, all right, well, I'm done here?
Well, I mean, so I'm pretty close to the person who runs the New York Platform Committee, so I would actually just laugh. But like, okay, yeah. But the thing is, though, if I you know, just run, then like wouldn't it be better for me to work my way up in the ranks and try to fix this problem?
Well, you know what?
Look, it's all a lost cause. It's a political party. Like, this is all, you know, okay. I'm involved because, you know, I think a third party can be used for things like networking. It gets people who are like-minded all in the same place, and, you know, it can be used as a front for education. But, like, I mean, I don't take this very seriously to begin with. So that also might be why I'm, like, not, like, gonna, you know, rage quit because I saw an opinion I don't like. I went into this saying, this is a dumpster fire. I'm gonna get involved and see what happens.
Yeah, that is fair. I could absolutely see why that's like a reason why you wouldn't want to leave. Because, like, say if I was like, I've never been in a political party before, but just out of curiosity, I'm going to go join the actual American Nazi Party to see what kind of fucking weirdos go to that.
What
like, I could see how you feel like, well,
work your way up to the top.
Well, no, I'm obviously not going to try to change it. But you know what I mean. Like,
yeah.
I can see why you're less inclined to leave from dissavory people because you already knew they were there when you showed up. You know, you weren't disappointed. You had low expectations. I can see how that would alter how you would react to that.
Mm-hmm. I guess keeping your expectations low is very good for your mental health.
Oh, man. God, I hate what a joke the Libertarian Party is. In the first place.
That's why I joined, because I'm sick of this thing being such an embarrassment. Like, you know, I, along with a ton of other people who had been identifying as small L libertarians for years, were like, you know, there's this thing called the Libertarian Party, but it's an absolute embarrassment to libertarianism. So eventually people got fed up enough and they're like, you know what, let's take this thing over and turn it into something that's not a total embarrassment, that actually reflects what libertarianism is. Fortunately, yeah, they've run into a lot of roadblocks. Some, some not their fault. Others, I think, self-imposed.
I believe I've said before, and I will say again, I feel like the problems that they ran into are structural problems that are inherent in the party structure,
I
as
think a
it
lot of
is
people
a
didn't
reflection
expect.
state.
A lot of people just didn't expect like how deep the corruption runs, I think.
I think it's a corruption machine. I think it's a machine that turns good people into corrupted people. Like, I feel like the parties, as parties are in America, are structured basically as mirrors of government structure. You play pretend government in your party until you can be a part of the government as your party. You know what I mean? So, like, with that structure, I feel like it inherently creates corruption. Like, in order to reach the top of the party, you have to subvert your values, and you will subvert your values if you want to reach the top of the party. And it just inherently funnels the worst, most slimy motherfuckers to the top. And only rarely do you actually get a what I call a true believer. And
right. Yeah, I said this before. You have to sell out to some extent in order to get things
and
like
it's
funding, to be able to, hold conventions, unless you want to have them in someone's living room, which is how the party started out.
And the funniest thing is like, okay, so this is true of Republicans and Democrats. Like what I'm saying right now, it's true of both of those parties. You have to sell yourself out if you want to get to the top. That's just how it works. And everyone knows this because that's just how it works. And yet somehow we expect the Libertarian Party to rise above this natural party pattern. What did you expect? You're literally the people who pointed this problem out, and you thought it wasn't going to affect you. Like, it's the structure. But anyway, that's enough. I don't know why we always talk about that. I'm gonna have to go soon, but I want to say, as a olive branch back to Jeremy, that anybody, in my opinion, anybody who has had a public instance of acknowledgement, like anybody who acknowledges publicly problematic beliefs and maintains close associations can be safely put into the camp of, well, I mean, you might as well be one. And I think that's like a pretty loose standard. It's not like, oh, he went to a podcast once, but like, let's say tomorrow if we found out Jordan Peterson had a Nazi basement, right? Like a straight up unironic Nazi memorabilia basement, unironic Nazi in his private life, right? Like, let's say that happened, right? And there's pictures of it, and Jeremy gets the pictures, and he fucking posts them on X, and he tags everybody who is a supporter of that guy. Anybody from that point forward who maintains associations can be safely put in the Nazi category, Nazi sympathizer category, and disregarded as a result. I feel like that's fair. But would everybody agree?
No, I think that there are some people who are close enough and in the right position to him that care about him that could try to change him.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. In public, let me be specific. Not personal associations. I mean, like, as a public figure, other public figures who are not related to him, like, but might have been professionally related to him. Like, from that point forward, now that there's incontrovertible evidence that he is and maintains that lifestyle, like, you can see it now, right? Like, do you see what I'm saying, or am I just going off on one?
No, I get what you're saying. I do think that I think if you say something, that to me says a lot if you counter them. So, like, one of the biggest problems to me was like, okay, so Chase Oliver at this last convention, somebody very loudly called him a gay slur, right? Like, while it was quiet. Walked in the room, people were like, eh. And they're like, who did that? And nobody wanted to say who it was. Now, everybody was like, oh, I did hear that. That was unfortunate. I don't know who it was. But there's at least like 30 people who were just sitting around, saw it happen, and are like, okay, I know it happened, but I'm not gonna say anything. And this is likewise. I mean, here's an olive branch for you here too. At another convention, Nick Sarwark bumps elbows with somebody walking down, goes, "That's assault. Get the police here." And if there wasn't a camera there, Well, Nick's a lawyer. That guy could legitimately go to prison, right? Like, and there's a certain point where you got to go, no, neither of these two. No, thank you. Right? Like where you disassociate with that, where you just kind of go, I don't want to be part of an organization where somebody calls somebody a gay slur and 30 random members from my organization fail to say anything about it or go, dude, no, like stop that. I won't have that, because I think Rose would. But the trouble is she is such a minor exception that 30 random people from her organization, we know factually won't say anything. This is like an actual test that's been conducted. You know what I mean? Won't say anything. And I want Rose to associate with people that will. Now, her associations are her choice. I'm not saying like no. I believe in the fights she's doing. I've liked the resolutions she'd offered and the change she's making. Rose, I think it's absolutely respectable to try to change the Mises Caucus, like to actually be like, hey, I don't want to be part of this route anymore. I'm not saying you have to give up. I'm just saying that when you hear like, hey, somebody got called that slur and none of our people said anything, nope, I'm going to work hard to make sure that doesn't happen. Believe me, I understand. I'm trying to redeem the name of Christianity over here, and we're talking imperialism and genocide and nationalism and statism and all kinds of Nazisms and like just terrible history, including just the modern culture of judgmental. Right, like, and you're like, do I just abandon the name Christian and call myself like a Jesusite? Like, I don't want to push people off, but at the same time, I do feel that it can be redeemed. I could be wrong. However, the big difference between like me and like what somebody, like you said with the example that's been thrown out here, this hypothetical with Jordan Peterson is, I will say something. I don't just like might say something. I absolutely will say something on cultural issues of Christianity. And if somebody has pray to God for dictator Trump and another installment of that, I am quick to be like, everybody might already know where I stand on it, but you're going to get another dose of it anyway, right? Because obviously this is an issue, right? This is the problem we have is a lot of people say, well, everybody knows that I don't really like Nazis, so why do I need to say anything? Well, because there's 30 random people in a room that don't feel they need to say anything when they see bigotry in front of their face, when they see those kinds of insults hurled at somebody who should be a friend, right? Who should be an ally, you know? And so for me, like everybody's got to make their own decisions as far as this goes. I do think there's a point where we have conversations like this one where we say, we kind of strategize. How do we redeem? What's the best way to confront people? What's the best way to say something? You know, if I want to see a change, what do I need to do? What's a good time to cut loose? One of the toughest parts about being a Christian, my mom said this was her toughest thing in faith, and I got to agree with her, is when God is giving you a test to overcome or God is giving you a sign to get out. They often look very similar. You know, like when it's like, is this a test for me to try harder? I can't answer that for anybody else. You know, if the Mises Caucus becomes like both economically and socially libertarian and a force for like good, I will be the happiest person to eat so much crow. Like I will be so happy. I'll be like, Rose won. I will be like so stoked. Like I'm rooting for it so hard.
Unique. Like I'm really not that unique. Like again, this is a big tent, and with multiple different factions. You know, different because most of my experiences with the New York Mises Caucus, and you know, most of them are great people. So yeah, again, I just think. I think messaging and strategy could use some work.
Well, so I know you got to go, William. I want to give you some closing statements before you do, and then
sure.
You know, we can start continue the conversation. But real quick before that, if you can get those people on who are also dissenters to this authoritarian right wing regime. People who are also okay with being critical of Malay, for instance. People who are okay with, going against the culture war bullshit. People who are accepting of trans people. People who are, actual, authentic alternatives within the Mises Caucus. Let's get them on the show. Let's get them. Because if those people can actually form a block within the caucus, a caucus within the caucus, they might actually be able to have some cultural power. And if they're willing to show themselves and be public about this, you say, hey, I've got this guy, everybody hates him, but he might have a very good platform that we could, have a discussion on about these issues that we all actually care about, then maybe there could be some needle moving. Like, that's what I want to see. I want to see this needle move. And so if you know these people, if you're not that special, let's get a caucus going. Let's get an actual group of people on this show so that they can like actually speak to these issues on a more like general basis, so that like, you're not the visible odd woman out in terms of these issues. And then I'll give Appalachian the floor, and then I'll also say Rose Hody.
Right. Oh, I was gonna say though, yeah. Don't forget Bryce. Bryce is also Mises Caucus member.
Yeah, he's welcome to come on as well.
That's two of us at least.
He needs to get up there. Anyway, my closing statements are that I don't like Nazis, and I don't like bigots, and also don't like tankies, and I especially don't like the state in any form. And I think that we should constantly be trying to get more people to recognize that the state does not represent their best interests. I feel like everybody believes in everything because they think it represents their best interests, and so you have to figure out what their interests are and figure out a way to appeal to those interests if they are appealable to. Now, there is a certain limit. There's some interests that are not appealable, but that's a separate conversation. However, the hunters are getting close to my location, so I must end this communication and return to the woods. Good night, everyone.
Good luck.
Later, buddy.
Be well. So, Rose Hody. And like we can go on for a while, or we can start wrapping. It's largely up to y'all, but like let's continue on that vein for just a little bit.
Oh, well, I was going to say that would more or less be my pitch. I'd be like, yeah, there's this guy you probably have blocked, but maybe consider going on this. Okay, I will say, like, because I was going to say this earlier, like, okay, despite what you say about yourself, you're usually completely fair and reasonable on streams. Unfortunately, though, I think a lot of people, you never actually get that far with them because, they're only seeing how you interact on Twitter, and they're concluding that you're, just a troublemaker. So then they block you. Like, they're like, this guy is, calling people Nazis based on, vague connections to other people. Like, no, fuck that. I'm blocking this guy because I don't want to get slandered by having someone spread rumors that I'm a Nazi. I'm going to tell all my friends, okay, this guy goes around calling people Nazis. I'm, going to tell them that they should add this guy to their block list. So I guess that's where part of, my frustration comes from. Like, I think I just think it's counterproductive. Like, you want to be able to get people, to talk to you, and then you could ask them directly. You're like, okay, so you can be like, okay, so do you support, these things that you wrote on Twitter? When a lot of people will say things that are deliberately provocative, or, they'll say things that when they're clearly trolling, those are not actually a reflection of their beliefs. So I think it's best if you can, talk to people and find out if that's actually what they believe. Like, I mean, I've mentioned this before, but like when I talked to Rechtenwald at the New York Libertarian Convention, like I was pleasantly surprised to find out that a lot of his views were on various social issues were a lot more nuanced than they would appear on Twitter or, on other social media or in, those cringy promotional videos. So I guess, yeah, to summarize some of my, constructive criticisms and also frustrations with, I guess, calling or insinuating that someone is a supporter of a particular thing or might be a particular thing.
What do you got, Hody?
Yeah, I mean, they're just, for me, all I ask is like one of two things. Either be like, hey, I've disassociated with the action. I'll just leave it at that, action. I've disassociated with the person, or hey, I'm really working on them. If people ask where I'm at with like Winograd, like I'll tell them, you know what I mean? Like where we're at. All I just want to see is just some amount of action. I think the issue that I have is that people have is dead silence, and it bugs everybody. Like, I just want to say, like, The silence about Nick Sarwark almost sending an innocent person to prison is infuriating. Like,
Yep.
that is one of those things that make you go, they call us a cult. This guy almost sent an innocent person to prison. Like, this is like, you know what I mean? Like,
makes you wonder how many times he did that too.
Oh, plenty. But yeah, that was honestly hilarious if you watch the video. Like, he like,
oh, it is.
Vaguely,
because he realized there's video footage. Like, he's like,
vaguely brushes up against some guy's elbow, and then he's like all over dramatic. He's like, I have evidence that this was a premeditated attack. And the best part, he's wearing a shirt that says "Statist's gonna state." Well, he's threatening to immediately involve the cops.
The cops did show up. I mean, that was there's video of him talking to him and everything.
Embarrassing.
Well, yeah, but like beyond embarrassing, the issue is it's like I talked last week about the people who call the state like a pedophile murder cult, right? Like, you know, like Shane Hazel and stuff. And then they're like, but I want to give immigrants over to that pedophile murder cult. It's like,
yeah,
well,
that's so
okay.
serious.
Nope. Yeah, that's one of those where it's like, okay, well, obviously you and I are on different wavelengths about that. Now, people are people. Almost everybody is inconsistent on their positions, right? We all have biases. We all have favorites. We all say, you know, there's moments where I'm like, Rose, how can you not see how bad this is? And then I'm sure there's instances where Rose looks, and I guess I'm pretty moderate because I also don't like the Sark folks, but like looks at somebody and just goes, how can you not like absolutely say this is a line in the sand? Like, to me, it's difficult to be in my position. And like when we were talking about it in week 1, just being like, listen, Michael Heiss made the decision to lie about your podcast because he knew he needed you gone. And that's just part of politics. You know what I mean? Like, and that sucks. But it's still hard to hear that somebody thinks that that's like a necessary thing. You know what I mean? Like, I think we have a tough time being like, let me try to explain his point of view. Sorry, go ahead, Rose.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I am the type that I do judge people pretty harshly for throwing someone else under the bus to build themselves up. So, I mean, I agree with you. Yeah. That whole falling out where apparently you, were lied about. Yeah. No, I mean, sure. Yeah, I don't judge you for,
And the fact that it was intentional to say, well, and I understood it the way you guys explained it actually I still appreciate it. It made a lot of sense to me because it was like, if you guys don't go, all our people lose. Like, because you're never, like, I'm never going to let go of the social liberties. Like, I just won't. And so, yeah, like, I am always going to push for somebody who is maximum social and economic, like, you know, freedoms. And so I was never gonna, I understand why Heiss needed me out of the way. I was never gonna support any of his guys that were only economic freedoms based. You know, like I was always gonna choose somebody, even if he had somebody who was like, well, these guys can be good at it. I was always gonna choose somebody who was passionate about the social issues as well. So I understand it, but even so, that makes people feel bad. And like, I will say from my point, it still feels bad. Now, here's the thing is like, I know that's not really logical. Like, why are you against the Mises Caucus? Because they make me feel bad. But let's be honest, most people leave, like, look at any video about like why the people say this kind of stuff is why I left Christianity, for example. And I want to say, I'll say 90%, but I think it's probably closer to 95% of people will just be listing a bad behavior of a Christian. Now, is bad behavior of Christians representative of Christ or Christianity? Goodness, let's hope not, right? Like, is bad behaviors of anybody? Like, if I were to be like, well, I don't believe in Austrian economics because Hoppe and Rockwell are, like, terrible. Okay, that's not a reason to reject Austrian economics, but the thing is people aren't just logic machines. We do feel bad sometimes. We have emotions, we have opinions, we have things that we feel like, you know, and when somebody says, well, I'm not going to get involved with this because it makes me feel bad, that's something that's beyond a communication issue. This is how like 90% of people operate. And so I don't want to spend all this time, and one of the things that concerns me, because we kind of returned to the Mises Caucus a lot, but I never want to just push away the people in the Mises Caucus because like, I have friends that got involved for the right reasons. I mean, Archie Flower and John Hudak, who were probably the biggest critics of the Mises Caucus, like all-timers, like they were part of the Mises Caucus. Like they wanted Star Wars out.
Really, I think I tried to read their explanations for why they left, and I always tune out halfway through.
I'll read them at some point.
And that's a good example. Like for you, why they left makes you tune out, makes you kind of tired, makes you I don't know.
Well, I mean, okay, I think
versus somebody.
Sure, no, all there being valid reasons for why. Yes.
So like, yeah, they're valid, but like they don't excite you, right? They do the opposite. Like you say, like I can't finish reading this. Versus like somebody who is passionate about a different aspect of liberty or socialism or something. And they're being like, how can you fall asleep? Queer liberation is so exciting to me. And they don't understand, like a bunch of people that just go, queer liberation? Does there need to be a queer liberation, really? Isn't it all just liberation? Isn't it all just freedom? And they don't understand, like, why. I understand where people are coming from, where it's like, it's all one liberty. I'm actually somewhat sympathetic to that. However, I'm sympathetic in the way that also says, by that measure, I also can't say property rights. I can say just rights. I wouldn't be able to talk about like occupational licensing reform. I would just have to be like, no, rights. Like we label rights all the time, right? So let's not be like dense about it. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, Rose. You're just the one who's brave enough to talk about it. And you don't have to answer for everything.
I thought things like, LGBT rights were one of those things that was so well established and like so obvious that it didn't even need to be said, which was why I got so irritated. I'm like, okay, why is the National Party Twitter account just going to talk about like same-sex marriage all day when it's okay? We agree this is well established. Like, why aren't they talking about like COVID lockdowns or imperialism? So again, that was naivety on my part. I'll acknowledge that because when you stop talking about these things, it does seem like people from certain other circles move in and because they think that you're suddenly friendly to their position.
Yeah, people, racism seems so distant to me. Yeah,
collectivism.
That like the idea somebody could actually be it is like.
Right, like people are individuals. You can't judge anyone on something like an immutable trait such as, skin color or sex or gender.
All racism comes off as a joke because racism's a joke. Like, you know what I mean? You just assume it's a joke.
Like, you can't grasp that people are individuals. How can you, like, that's like the basis of libertarianism. How can you call yourself a libertarian? Again, like,
platform.
Apparently, apparently if you stop talking about it for long enough, people forget this very important core aspect of our philosophy.
Right. Or stop talking about it or stop taking it seriously or make jokes about it or, whatever the rationale may be. Everybody comes for different reasons.
Yeah, and it started out like, okay, we can joke about this because it's so obvious that we don't believe it that, okay, it's just lighthearted humor.
Yeah.
But
for you is Jeremy Coppin's passion for existence, right? Like this is super important.
Looking at that Toad guy because it just seemed so over the top ridiculous that I can't possibly take it seriously. I'm like, okay, this guy is just trying to get a rise out of people because if I were going to create a persona deliberately to piss off, the politically correct left, this is what I would do.
But see, here's the other half of that. I knew Toad years ago. And he was slowly slipping down a far-right rabbit hole.
Right, it was visible.
We used to talk to him all the time. He was in a group message involving me on Twitter. And one of the things he was doing was he was talking to us about how it was difficult for him to control his drinking and gambling. And we were trying to be there for him. We were trying to encourage him to get out of that life. And I'm glad that I think he did. I think he might not be drinking anymore. I don't know if he's still gambling, but the point is that, like, we knew him in a personal way that the vast majority of the internet didn't. We also saw him hitting or missing with certain pursuits in his life. I'll put it that way. I'm not going to air out his business. The point is that, like, we knew. We watched. And it was the case with him and multiple other people in these circles that they just got worse and worse and worse. And it's because they agreed with enough of the ideas that they eventually started to spread. And it's because they started to participate in these things and think it's no big deal, it's just humor. And then eventually, they're not joking anymore. And like, you know, that's the case with, it's literally like, if you look up how like the Daily Stormer and all these mainstream Nazi organizations like advocate trying to recruit, they say start with humor. They say start simple. They say start getting people planting these based mind viruses, and it's where like you'll go viral, but don't reveal your whole power level yet because you're on the recruiter end and you're trying to get these people to slowly become more and more based and less woke. And like that's how like these people believe that. These people support that. And then when it becomes a reliable pattern, and when a Toad is still like positively associating with people who are actively supporting lies about Jewish slave boats, and other people who are actively supporting a racist, fascist agenda in a variety of political avenues, when you see these people start to slip further and further and further into that crowd and get reified, because, that's how you get the support of the Tim Pool crowd. That's how you get the support of the red-headed libertarian. That's how you get the support of, like, a huge amount of the Mises crowd, including the Mises Caucus GOP, which is a whole new ball of worms. Like, when you get these people, they've got so many interconnected parts of their network that are designed to push people to the auth-right. Not the libertarian right, but the auth-right. And a lot of them will adopt the same retro wave aesthetics. They'll adopt the same memes. They'll adopt the same pseudo-trad ideals. They'll adopt the same mentalities, the same cultural output, the same approaches, the same attitudes, the same aesthetics. And you'll start to realize these little similarities building up, and the snowflakes will make an avalanche. And, that's what I've been watching happen with Toad for a long time. It's not just him either, it's all these other people as well. It's the fact that they're affiliated with a bunch of people, like Liberty Hangout, for instance, literally said that their transparent mission was to infiltrate libertarianism and make it right-wing. It kind of worked. They kind of
libertarians once, and then, but like way back when they were vaguely libertarian.
Well, way back when they had people like Eric July on board. Way back when.
But he always was, fairly open to working with conservatives. And there was a time when I'm like, mostly during the COVID lockdowns, when the only people who vaguely agreed with us on lockdowns were, unfortunately, conservative groups. I'm like, maybe he has a point, and maybe, they are easier to ally with. Unfortunately not, because, they have various cultural hangups that, they just have a very hard time letting go of, and they're not long-term allies.
Well,
about the GOP Mises Caucus, that was a very short-lived thing, though, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, it's almost like when you try
Isn't it still around? PDQ?
Barely.
Wasn't that Pete Quinonia's trying to start it because he had some falling out with the actual Mises Caucus?
Yeah, and then it went exactly nowhere.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny how these people consistently lose until they just get rid of the veneer of libertarianism and then just go full statist.
I think he was. No, I mean, I used to follow him. He was a libertarian, but I've watched the descent down the pipeline, and usually, I mean, maybe they'll test the waters with jokes, like you were saying, but normally, there's a certain trajectory they usually follow. They'll conclude that you need certain cultural values in order for our principles to actually work. And then over time, they'll become more and more open to the idea that, okay, if you want to be able to, maintain a society such as the one we're envisioning, and you want to be able to protect people's rights, we need to get control of the state apparatus and wield it, in such a way that it would benefit us rather than letting our enemies get a hold of it. Basically, it's the old metaphor that, if you and one other person are in the room and there's a gun on the table, would you rather be the one holding it, or would you rather they be the one holding it? They like to bring up this hypothetical.
Yeah.
PDQ wants to hold it and use it. I mean, there's some people who want to hold it and then not aim it at anybody. I've heard PDQ enough. He wants to use that damn thing.
Power is pretty terrifying.
Yeah, and he literally has this thing that he now repeats where he says might makes rights. Like,
Uh-huh.
and he claims that, like, without, like, just forcing people to do what you want, you have no rights. And maybe you don't, like, maybe you could make the case that rights don't even exist, and that, it just boils down to what you can force people to do. But if you're going to use the concept of rights, then that's when you, like, that's when you shut the fuck up about, like, might makes rights, because it doesn't, by definition. And if you're trying to say that, like, rights are founded in like physical force principles, then that's just a shit argument. It doesn't make any sense from the, like, base foundation of rights. But, like, he made that argument, and a bunch of people fucking clapped like the little trained seals they are, because they're not willing to criticize these people, and because they
Well,
go along to get along.
or they agreed with them, and now
Yeah.
someone whose takes you normally think you agree with is saying something, and you're like, whoa, well, is this the correct position? Or yeah, I mean, okay, so someone starts going down the pipeline. I mean, it takes, like, normally their support drops off gradually because people who had been close to them try to stay close to them because they're like, okay, yeah, I don't like the trajectory this guy is on, but what, am I supposed to just cut all associations with him? But I mean, yeah, these things take time.
That they do.
So again, I think the point I was making there was, again, someone being associated with someone who, yeah, has fallen into one of these rabbit holes or who has some bad takes. Again, it doesn't necessarily indicate that they are in agreement or that they're endorsing the views of this particular person.
Well, if it happens enough that they support the person, and if it happens little enough that they don't support something the person says, then that's my trigger. Like, for instance, okay, so here's two examples. One, this is credit I'll give to Toad. I will say that Toad is one of the only people in these spaces. Let me get my camera working again in case this is clipped. Toad is one of the only people in these spaces willing to call out Javier Milei, which is good, because Javier Milei is a snake oil car salesman fucking piece of garbage, and an authoritarian statist extraordinaire. I have had...
Is it for the right reasons?
He says, and he specifically said this, that this issue is one issue where I get it completely correct. He has said that specifically. So credit where credit is due. Toad is willing to express difference there. That means that he's not just lockstep. He's also, like, he's got his own niche carved out in this, like, sort of ecosystem. Josh Smith, he was willing to quit his position at the LP. And he was willing to step down because they wouldn't get rid of Ritter at the rally. And because they wouldn't get rid of all these pro-war people at an alleged anti-war rally. Since then, he has spent some time arguing with Toad. He is willing to argue. He is willing to argue with people in his camp to try and come to a better conclusion. Joshua Smith said that Toad is wrong. And you know one of the things that was fucking awesome? He called him out. And the reason he called him out is because he said that this arming the immigrants thing, you're completely wrong about that, because you should read the case law and find out that this is great for American gun owners. And he kept on saying, and he literally said, read the case. And Toad just said, no. Because that's who we're dealing with. And so even Toad, who has some good positions, still needs to be put in check on a lot of his shit positions. And Josh Smith was willing to do that. And props to him. He has principle in a lot of areas that a lot of the other libertarians don't. Mike Tiermat, I think it was, said none of your business when Inquisitor Clint Russell asked about whether or not people were vaccinated during the debates. Jacob Hornberger had his car rants after the debates where he, like, really laid into these people in a way that he couldn't during these soundbite bullshit fake debates that these people falsely call that. And he had really good principled positions on a variety of things there. Fucking Lars Mapstead. He's willing to call out a lot of the, like, more antagonistic circles here, and he's willing to have a lot more, like, nuance in his positions and not attack minorities as a par for the course. That's great. More people should be like Lars in that way. But then you get to people who are just toxic, or people who are just bad at messaging. Like, Rechtenwald is like the tax accountant who, like, sticks around a little bit too long and sniffs your hair. That's the impression people should get looking at his... And he can't stop licking. For some reason, like, they should call him...
one-on-one conversation, I think, and he's been on, like, interviews, but yeah, debates, I mean, yeah, we all have our strengths and weaknesses, I think.
Or his street interviews where he did not seem attached to the subject matter. There were a whole lot of jump cuts. I would have rather listened to anyone he was interviewing than him specifically. His whole deal is like, he's got some good ideas. He's good on certain things, but then it's like, yeah, sure, but so are other candidates. Like the things that when Dave Smith endorsed him and we got the email about that, I saw just when they listed out the things, I saw all of these positions are just things that other people in the libertarian sphere hold. We don't need, like, if this...
Right. There are other candidates who have great positions. I will say as much. I mean, I personally really like Jacob Hornberger. I think, he's one of the most consistent libertarians that who's also a public figure and who's, running for the LP presidential nomination.
Yeah. And so what I'm saying is, like, I'm not trying to say that, I hate the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian Party is irredeemable and anybody who doesn't live up to my standards and do what I say they should do, they get the death penalty. They should be drug out into the street and raped by dogs, just like Pinochet said. It's like, fucking, no, I'm not trying to fucking condemn. All I'm trying to say is, if you end your speech with white power, fuck you.
Can I just say, if you ran on that platform, though, you'd probably get a lot of supporters. They'd be supporting you ironically.
Yeah, I'd say it's just jokes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd make it like, but that's the thing. Like,
you'd have to say unironically while saying it.
Yeah, like, I'm all about, like, trying to figure things out. I'm all about trying to be different. But so many of these people are in lockstep in all the ways that matter to affiliate them with the label fascist. If they don't want to be, there's a way to not be. But they don't care enough to actually do it. And that's the problem.
I mean, especially when you're a professional messenger, right? Like, this is your job to separate yourself from these people. And so they want to go, well, it's not my fault that other people assume this, like, Nazi adjacent thing I said, or this friendship I said. That's their assumptions. I don't see why I should have to. Well, it's the world and you have to, right? Like, it's if you're a professional messenger and people take it a certain way, that's on you. I'm a writer. I have to convey things a certain way. When I start to lose my grip is when I argue with people, when somebody's like, oh, I didn't get that from your writing. I thought that this meant that I should run over here. Like, if you read a workout guide and somebody was like, oh, I took this to mean no days off. And he's like, well, I never specifically said no days off. I just said 24/7. And it's like, oh, okay, well, 24/7 might be a specific phrase. But I tell you what, if somebody comes up to you and says, man, I took that to mean workout every day, no days off, your first reaction should be, oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, let me clarify that right away. Not like, I don't feel the need to say anything about Nazism because I feel like everybody should probably know how I feel about Nazism. Because like I said, with Christian nationalism, I want to know what you think about nationalism. I wanted to know that the Christians weren't actually seriously nationalists. But they were. And the problem is they denied, or said, oh, what a ridiculous accusation, until it became it.
Yep.
Now they just are. And so, like, this is part of being a professional messenger as opposed to just like a social media troll. if you're running for some of these positions, like Rose, you said, we're not going to win anything, right? So we might as well, I mean, we might as well at least be good on messaging, right? We're using this as a platform. So let's use this platform positively as opposed to badly. You know, like let's say like, oh, a significant number of people have been confused about this. I'll clarify. I don't care right wing, left wing, who's got an issue with it. Are there some people who are going to disingenuously take things the wrong way? Sure. But my job isn't to say you're disingenuous, you're not, you're disingenuous, you're not. My job is to say like, yeah, I want to create clarity with my positions. And if my position is unclear, I want to be willing to engage with further clarity, you know, as opposed to just being like, because I think you'll see these people who are like, I don't see why I should have to answer to that. But instead, you'll get like some people who will be like, well, by this logic, you know, businesses should have had to shut down if public property isn't if we can kick immigrants out. And all of a sudden those same people go, oh, whoa, let me clarify, let me get into the thing here, as opposed to just being like, ha, 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 you're so ridiculous. You know, and the reason they're willing to clarify is because they're sympathetic with a certain group and not sympathetic with a different group. Ultimately, we libertarians aren't going to win with the army we have. And so we have to be willing to recruit. We have to be willing to embrace things. Maybe we don't even, this happens all the time. As a Christian, I didn't deserve grace and I got it anyway. I think that's a template for this world. There's a lot of people who don't deserve a chance to be libertarians because their history is so vile. But I do believe in trying to reach these people anyway. You know, try to see what you can get out of them. Now, if they start taking people away, if you see them go the PDQ direction, then you kind of go like, all right, I'm not going to let you pull like my crowd with me, like with you. Like that's no, my people are good and I don't want you to be a detriment to that. But I do want to still try to reach out to those kinds of people and say like, maybe even if they have the wrong view on it, talk to them, listen to them, hear them out, hear their wrong view. I will engage with a racist. No issues. Like if Jeremy Kaufman was serious about his questions and he was like, hey, listen, I've got all these scientific studies telling me something. And to be honest with you, I just don't know where they went wrong. And I respond and he's like, thank you for that information. Hey, listen, I still got some questions. I'm not saying he has to immediately convert to my side. People change their mind, especially on big issues. It takes months, sometimes years. Sometimes you have to test the water. I mean, I'll admit my view on homosexuality in the Bible, I read the words, I felt the spirit. I was like, boy, I think I've had the wrong view on this my whole life. And it still probably took about like 6 or 7 months for me to finally go public and be like, you know what? Yeah, here's what it is, you know? And that's just part of being a human being. And so I think we need to understand that people are humans. We're talking to humans. We need to understand human imperfections. But, you know, be willing to reach these people. At the same time, I'm absolutely going to say, there's a time when you aren't the person for the job. My block list is as big as anybody's, believe me. You know, when you know people are directly harassing you, threatening you, right. Threatening your followers, whatever it may be. This is something like I think it's funny because I hang out with people in the LPMC and like the people anti-LPMC about equally, and both the things they constantly are telling me about, like, what about all these death threats? What about this? What about that? F those guys. Like, F them both. Like, I'm not taking a side. I'm not choosing Sarwark or Heiss. These people are abominable, right? Like, there comes a point where you got to say none of the above. And like, let's do our own thing. You know, let's hope to try and get some unity as opposed to just constantly creating these lines of division. Yeah. Appalachian brought this up last week. Let's have division of labor. Let's have people say, like, I'm passionate about this social issue. I'm passionate about this economic issue. I'm passionate about prescription drug freedom. I'm passionate about, great. Let's divvy all these out, get people in areas where they're passionate. And if they ask you about an area where you just don't have it, like, it's impossible to be passionate about everything. I try to be passionate about most things, but like, there's some issues. I don't know what's going on in Libya right now. I would have to receive a lot of education. And even then, I would still be behind somebody who has spent 10 years studying the situation there. Now, I can, because I have bias, I'm going to try to put an anarchist or libertarian skew on it. But it's probably better for me to say, hey, this guy, foreign policy expert, has been studying what's going on in Libya, knows a lot more information about that. Please talk to them. If you just say, like, man, gay rights, I just don't get it. I don't see why it's that important. I don't see why it's that big a deal. Okay, great. Give them to somebody who it is a big deal for. Austrian economics. People say, I don't get it. It's too complicated. Like, okay, go. If you that's how you feel, but you still love liberty, hand them over to Rose, right? Like, give them over to somebody who's like, oh man, let me tell you about some really cool stuff about Austrian economics, you know? And I think in this way, we can kind of become perfected, you know? We as a body of Christ are called to be perfect together. But Christians, none of us are going to be perfect. So the only thing we can do is find that unity, find our role within the body of Christ. And I think just like libertarians, we find our role within that liberty movement, and do the best we can with that.
And three things, just, and then I'll pass that to Rose, because I'm sure she has got like hella responses. First off, what's happening in Libya, if I understand correctly, is the U.S. government is backing a unification of their military and government, all while they're also pledging to help them interfere more in Sudan oil disputes. So that's fucking awesome. We're potentially getting another fucking Gaddafi situation maybe 8 years down the line. But then the second thing is, I've got some comments here that both of you can respond to. Max Wellington 3, hello, it's been 800 years. I may have been hanging out with leftists too much, but there shouldn't be any room in the LP for waffling on fascism. I don't see, quote, I don't see why I should answer that equals, quote, I don't want to piss off the fascists on my side. I generally tend to agree with that assessment a lot of the time. A lot of the time, they don't want to rock the boat. Christopher Baker, hello. Also, I hope this panel is more to your liking. Tho Bishop is the Red Team Mises Caucus. He is all by himself. I think that he was backed by people like Pete, though, if I remember correctly. Also, Earth Nerd said, some people can't be reasoned with. Quote, maybe the person who reaches him will be Jesus, felt the same as bless your heart. She also says, thank you for your service, Hody. So, some positive feedback there. So I think that those three can be responded to. And then the third thing is, that's the thing. Like, I'm okay with talking to them, but they're going to have to hear how I think Nazis are pieces of shit. Or in some kind of way, they're going to have to hear from me that I think that there's a culture that's a problem. I'm going to talk to anyone who'll have my ear, but I'm going to have like an actual serious discussion about my take here and my opposition to that culture. And if I didn't, I would consider that a personal abdication of my responsibility, because I can't just say, yeah, I want unity, but I'm going to get that unity with you at the expense of the people you say you want to murder. It's like, it's a little bit hard to get unity, especially the kind that I'm trying to achieve, which is across the board, left to right, 0% authority, spectrum unity. While also saying, I'm with these people who say, commies get the chopper, or, that sort of thing. Or in this particular case, supporting a bunch of, authoritarian right-wing positions, and then saying white power at the end. I don't care that he's joking. He's a shitbag, And so if I can say that, and then also be willing to acknowledge that he had a good take on Malay, that Josh Smith, even though I disagree with his position on, for instance, trans people, it's a recurring theme, he has good positions on the illegal immigrant gun thing. And he had great positions. He's one of the few people in those circles willing to take a strong and personal stance against, all grooming as he sees it. Not just, the let's saddle LGBT people with all of that and not clean up our own camp. At the very least, he's consistent, even though I think that there's a lot of conversation that I could have with him about LGBT people in general. At least he's principled in certain ways that other people aren't. I could keep on listing all the people that I listed earlier. I'm not going to do that. I'm just using those two as an example because they argued recently over that issue. And Josh was right. And Josh calling people out for their bad takes, especially when their bad takes are the result of fucking ignorance. Like, he said, read the case, and Toad said no. That says everything. When it's the result of fucking ignorance, when you won't even try to understand, and when that's the audience you foster, that's the kind of thing that I was saying earlier. Toad and a lot of Toad's people don't give a fucking shit. You can make the meticulous case that something is the case, and if you're a commie, according to their stupidly broad definition of commie, you're out.
Oh yeah, no, that's probably my biggest pet peeve, where someone just dismisses you, outright, and won't even, bother to find out. Like, they won't even bother to read or listen to anything you've said. They don't even, bother to find out what you actually, or believe or support. Yeah, no, I agree there. Yeah. And yeah, to that commenter, yes, I agree. I would not be worried about offending actual fascists if they were in my camp. That is true. Again, I feel like that word tends to get thrown around as someone who has been accused of being a fascist before. Hi, Kareem.
Hi.
You came in near the end. We're close to rapping.
I'm rapping too.
I was gonna say, yeah.
I'm offended by stuff.
Shit, was I supposed to? Yeah. I don't know if I can start busting rhymes, so someone else wants to get started.
I've got some raps, but those are going to be coming out within the next couple months on actual music.
Jeremiah's going to be like,
no preview.
Now testify. It's right outside your door. Now testify.
I need a guitar for that.
I mean, I can give you one.
If you want to ship me a guitar, I'll take a guitar. I'm not going to say no.
Do you know how to play it?
I need to learn. I was starting to learn a while back, but I would be willing to put in the hours. So, I'll take it. If it's on the table, I would put in hours a day trying to learn that thing, because it's been a long time since I actually had one of those. I'm down, but we'll talk about that. This might be the beginning of that particular arc in my life where I just become that fucking that stoner looking rocker guy. Only I'll be clean and sober. Yeah, right. But I won't be one of those annoying straight edge fucks. I'll just say, hey man, yeah, I think it's probably better for your life if you fucking don't corrupt your brain, but it's not my business, anyway. So we were just generally talking. So Kareem, introduce yourself. We'll go for a little bit more, and we can get your feedback on this. I'm assuming you might have been listening in on some of it.
Yeah, some of it, and some of the conversations. Just I missed the Skype link. I'm like, oh crap, they are live.
Buried under all the voice messages, most likely.
Yeah, that was the issue. They're long paragraphs of text and then voice messages.
That's fine, because most people send voice messages.
I do too sometimes. It depends what I'm doing. If I'm
yeah. I should actually start making use of those, because they do seem like they'd be way more convenient than having to type on my phone.
Yeah, I noticed that you would take 18 minutes and then it'd be 3 paragraphs, and I'd be like, okay.
Well, because I'll get started then, Okay, so the problem is, most of these conversations, I'm dividing my attention between that and, other things. So, I'll start writing something, then I'll get distracted, then go back.
You live in New York, so you're probably getting mugged, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And you're probably like, hi, Hochul. I love Pol Pot. He sure did a good job. Please don't.
Or rather, having to fend off muggers. I have to walk several blocks every morning, between the parking lot and the building I actually work in. It's not unusual to have at least 2 people try to approach me with the, hey, do you have directions? Or, hey, do you have the time ploy?
Hey, what do you think? Hey, we live in New York. What do you think of Comrade Stalin? No, I'm not a tanky. Oh.
Comrade Hochul.
See, what you got to do is you got to get this expression on everywhere you walk, and you just got to be like.
I do. I have resting bitch face, but.
Because
they can ask me. They still think I'm gonna fall for their bullshit.
Well, let me tell you, I generally don't get fucked with. You gotta get stomped forward, and you gotta seem like when people have described the way I walk, they say it looks like you're about to fight a truck. And I'm like, well, bitch, maybe I am.
Maybe you are.
What if that truck just killed a family? I think if I fought that truck off before it there'd be what I'm saying is anti-truck action.
There's never a wrong time to be like prepared to fight a truck if you have to.
Especially Fords.
True.
Yeah.
They're more likely to kill you when you're trying to drive to work.
Yeah, right?
You know.
I'm gonna say. Oh. I was then you can be a mother trucker.
Yeah, there you go. So
Did you
So in general, what's your take on the things that were said earlier?
So there were a ton of voice messages. My take is this: that yes, if you hang out with said person, if I have a live stream with, okay, I've been on spaces with Jackson Henkel. That doesn't make me a tanky. Or Haas to debate like the Israel-Palestine stuff.
Yeah.
Because I think that's an issue. That doesn't mean I think Stalin's a libertarian. Like when I saw that video, I'm like, really? Like out of all people, that's not a libertarian. So I can be in like different spaces. You know, at the war rally, there were a bunch of people who were not libertarians. Like, does Max Blumenthal do some good journalism? I think he does. Even Tucker Carlson did good job, I think, recently with his more recent video.
He has the occasional decent take. I mean, like if you're grading on a curve of like MSM journalists, yeah.
People got mad. They're like, "Why did you talk to a Christian in the Middle East? You know, we don't want to. Those don't exist. Free." And people are like, "Well, does this mean that he hates?" I'm like, "Look, listen. That doesn't mean anything." So I think you can associate with people, to my understanding, if this was a conversation, because it was so like long. And as far as Toad, I think Toad's a joke. Toad doesn't represent anything in the Libertarian Party. Tower Gang isn't good. Even Clint says, don't listen. Someone said I'm a teacher in a Spaces, and Clint said, don't watch Tower Gang. Haha. He's like, seriously, don't look at Tower Gang. Tower Gang isn't representative of the LPMC or any serious libertarian. Tower Gang to me is kind of like that guy who's like in the corner doing drugs.
But Clint was routinely on Tower Gang. He was one of the hosts of Tower Gang, so
he's not no more.
Okay, but that doesn't say anything about his and if he still associates with a bunch of people and agrees with a bunch of people who supported the Tower Gang's positions on various things, I don't believe him.
You can't walk away from a crowd but still believe some of the same things, but also have fundamental differences on other things that cause you to walk away from them in the first place.
If he's willing to state what those fundamental differences are and actually put that distance, otherwise it's just optics cucking.
Again, like I've said, like, I don't know.
It's kind of an issue.
The urge to like go make call out posts.
Yeah, because then like I guess you could sit there and be like,
Clint,
no problem making call out posts.
Yeah,
let's be honest.
Okay, in some circumstances.
That's the point,
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But what would I? Okay, let's say I did. I'm not
like,
sure.
There was like this guy who got outed as like a pedo like last year. I mean, there have been a lot of those, but I'm just saying in my particular circles. And yeah, I had no problem sharing around posts saying this, and tipping off people who still had him on their friends list or had him in groups and stuff. Yes.
Okay, but look, first of all, call out post wouldn't work because I call him out anyway, and I tag Clint, and Clint doesn't respond to me. So that's one. Even if I did call him out, he's not going to say anything.
But I'm saying Clint should make a post about why he's no longer at Tower Gang if he really feels that strongly about it, and if he doesn't, then I have nothing to go off of other than he's not doing it anymore. And that could just be a scheduling conflict. That could be a conflict where he's like, well, I'm not bald enough to go on that podcast. It could be some bullshit, dumb reason. I don't even know. If he's not explicit about his reasons for dissociation, I don't know that he dissociated. I think maybe his schedule is full. He's too busy being officially accepted by the Libertarian Party and leading debates, and shit like that, and working with Thaddeus Russell for massive panels with people like Matt Taibbi and people like that to be like, maybe we'll make a post about this You know, I don't think. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that he's significantly enough ideologically separated from the Tower Gang just because he says don't watch it. That seems more like an ad. It seems more like he's saying don't watch that podcast. It's sort of like when I say, don't watch my fucking channel. My channel's, just an insane conspiracy theorist with clear psychological issues. Jeremiah Talks is the worst channel on the planet. Don't watch this channel. Definitely don't like, share, and subscribe. Don't do any of that. Fucking, it's not clear to me that saying don't is that. He didn't say
but
why.
If he saying he didn't associate with these people anymore, like, there would still be people who claimed, oh, he doesn't actually mean it. He's just trying to drive traffic there. He's just trying to make himself look better by, offering up plausible deniability. Like, you really can't win with some people.
You could get money by suing the CIA, like Alex Jones.
But fuck those people too, is what I'm saying. Like, even if those people aren't winnable at all, then fuck those people too. But that doesn't mean you don't try.
I don't think. Okay.
So would you actually believe him if he said, "I'm not with these people anymore"? Or would
if Clint
he really did say that.
If Clint gave a list of substantial reasons to no longer support those people, and he was real clear and extremely explicit about those reasons, and he was like, I don't associate, I advise you don't associate, or I don't watch this podcast anymore, it's no longer representative of my values, and he stated what made his new values different, yeah, sure, and if he did the same thing, if he was like, yeah, I don't support Andrew Tate. Human trafficking is a crime, and he shouldn't have groomed Vivian from 15, instead of like all these posts where he explicitly endorses Andrew Tate. If he did all this shit, like if he actually tried to distance himself, sure, I would accept the distance. I'm not trying to like keep people trapped in their past. I used to be a fascist. Like when I was in high school, I was pretty fashy. Just not when I was in, like, my internet days, and, like, I was pretty anti-fashy at the point at which I got added to this Nazi bullshit list. So, like, I understand. I'm not trying to trap people in their past. In fact, the opposite. Yeah. I'm trying to help them be like, you've got greener pastures out here where you don't have to constantly, like, make excuses for people who say things like white power after talking about gassing Israel and, like, trans people are just emos who are cutting off their dicks because they're sad. Like, let's be real here. Like, this is stuff you shouldn't have to distance from, and he wouldn't if he just did it. If he just ripped the Band-Aid off. If it was real, like, if it was made clear to people like Toad that you could not succeed in these circles and be like that, he wouldn't. Or he would just move over to the Nazi side officially and give up the ghost.
I honestly think, okay, for me, a lot, they could or couldn't. I've never heard anyone, to be fair, never heard anyone be like, man, my libertarian inspiration is Toad, Top Lobster, and
I have.
Sal the Agorist.
Who? Like, seriously, who?
I literally,
Again,
and I literally,
I wouldn't know people were if it weren't for social media.
And I literally have people in my mentions right now supporting that video because I shared it.
Because you shared it, so it attracted his audience. So of course they're going to be supporting him.
But that's a catch-22. So like when I was saying like, I do know people like that, of course those people would be in his audience. That's not an argument against those people having been like convinced of certain things by him and his crowd.
Right. I'm just saying, I think, you attracted the attention of his people who already supported him by sharing his video.
But I feel every party will have outlet. Like, there's there's people in the Republican Party, actually, who do advocate for genocide openly. There's always people in the Democrat Party who do.
Yeah. I made that point at the beginning. Like, I'm not saying any party alternative is perfect. All of them suck.
Yeah. I feel, and I have not, I'm sure I'll find out, because I have people trying to contact Jill Stein and Cornel West, and maybe we can get Lars to work with them on like an anti-imperialist ticket. I'm sure there are probably outliers there too who probably believe something that's not real good. I don't know what that is, but I feel every political party is going to get someone who's not there with it. And sometimes it's cool, sometimes it's funny, like Vermin Supreme. I think Vermin Supreme is funny. Like, oh, these guys are actual, like, either grifters or they are really like right-wing psychopaths.
Well, that was my impression. I'm like, oh, this guy is basically far-right Vermin Supreme when I first saw him.
Yeah, like Vermin Supreme, fine.
Yeah,
Also,
both just cringy people using the LP as a platform for, their performance, they call it.
I'll give Sal a pass because Sal has some base takes.
Sal the Agorist?
Sal steals all his based takes. He's whoever he has to be in the moment to get likes. It's pathetic.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with him. I think, I think I listened to his podcast way back when, but yeah, haven't really kept up, so yeah. No particularly strong opinions either way, but it does look like he has some rather cringy positions on things, so that's disappointing.
Yeah, because he'll take whatever position is popular enough to get him likes and retweets, and then he won't
their public persona.
Yeah, and then he won't delete them even when they're demonstrably false, even when it's like, and so like that's my deal with him. Like or when he's just directly supporting tyranny, like saying that the police are just fucking up communists. Them commies are getting what they deserve. Or that Pinochet is taking out the trash, or that Putin, is actually a great leader, and we need an American Putin, Well,
who says that?
Sal.
Great anarchist.
And so, what I'm saying, so unfortunately, he came in near the tail.
I think Daniel McAdams. Well, here's the funny thing: Daniel McAdams has great criticisms of Milei, like. Daniel McAdams is probably better than most people on Milei. Like, just like, hey, he's opening an American military base here. He's doing all this stuff with Patricia Bullrich. He's taking every deep state position, the IMF. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, Daniel McAdams is based. Then he's like, well, Putin is fighting again. I'm like, oh, boy, here we go.
Yeah.
Which... okay, you can make the argument that Putin is fighting globalists by saying the deep state, Ukraine's a deep state asset, the leadership is. I get that. But he's kind of like, yeah. I'm like, no. The issue I have is, I'm like, okay. It seems we're not, there's not a lot of us. There's not tons of libertarians walking around, even though it feels like that on the internet. I guess we want a coalition with somebody. And the issue I have is, it's like, hey, we got to go with this far right, or we got to go with this crazy people. And I'm like, dude, there's actual good people in C4SS. Why do we don't need Putin. We don't need Milei. We actually have the state for a centerless society. We could do that, and it wouldn't kill you to pick up some left-wing writers and read them. And that's what I think the LPMC could use to get more balanced. I think C4SS, if we worked with them, is probably one of the best organizations out there, because not only do they understand a lot of geopolitical issues, they understand social issues pretty well.
Yeah, no, I love C4SS. I recently directed a friend of mine to their website, and so he reads it. He's like, left-wing market anarchist? Nah. I'm like, no, seriously, give it a chance. These people are very knowledgeable. And for God's sakes, know your fucking origins.
Yeah, they're so bad. They're like, I don't need them socialists and I'm American. I'm like, so where does libertarianism start from? Well, I guess left-wing people. That's
being pro-market still gets you labeled, right-wing by the far left anyway. So I actually just avoid terms like the terms left and right without, really elaborating on what I mean.
If you listen to Roderick T. Long, who's a really good economist, who I friended, he actually said there can be a term called free market anti-capitalist. Yes. And when I said that to all the Mises people, they're like, no, Kareem, you're using leftist definitions that no economist would use. I'm like, He's head of the Molinari Institute. I think he's an economist. We're like, yeah, but fine, but free markets are capitalism. We're like, no, it's not. Capitalism is a worker-employee relationship.
Yeah, no, he came up with the concepts of, because I frequently have to explain, right and left conflationism to people. So,
Well,
he's great.
Well, unfortunately, and see, this is the thing. I want to continue. So the next thing we were gonna talk about on this channel was philosophy, and I suppose we sort of hit that today, but I want to hit this particular end of it harder, and I want to get into a real thorough conversation about all of the like potential the potential things that should be included, like in a libertarian's philosophical toolkit, and so there's that element of it, and then so I think I want to continue this particular part of the discussion on Sunday when we do that, and then because I think that this particular thing is where we need to really start picking at it to show that there's like a whole world of like similarities and places that we could really jibe with left and right libertarians on, and like if we do, like also I'm gonna get Jason Carrico in on this, like send him the link next Sunday. Ideally also Bryce, and if you can get other people, ideally some of these like Misesians you say are like actually outliers in the caucus. That also be excellent.
On the show. You're on Jacob's show, and it went pretty well.
Yeah.
I didn't see anything bad.
So, we had some disagreements, but those can be hashed out another time. And he's actually going to set up a debate with myself and some unstated heretofore Malay supporters. So that should be interesting. But like on Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern will be the next stream time, and I'll send the link a bit before that so we can get all the things set up. On Sunday, as many people as you can get, Rose, that you think are exceptional members of the Mises Caucus. You as well, Kareem. You as well, Hody, people that you think are exceptional libertarians. Let's just see if we can get an absolute clusterfuck of engagement. Like an absolute, like, cavalcade of people who are interested in having discussions. And then I'll try to just keep it managed and keep everyone flowing in the right direction so we can get everybody heard.
We might get an exceptional member soon. I really felt it. Like, I even argued with my chair, Bill Cox. If you know him, he's really cool. Rose might know him.
Right.
Me and Bill Cox had a thing, and I said, Bill, I was on Anomaly's stream one time. We had a very conversation about G. Edward Griffin and stuff. And I really feel Anomaly's kind of like a libertarian. And then I opened my Instagram, flipped through. He's talking to Dave Smith today. I was more excited about that than David Hogg, debating Spike Cohn, because that's like, but yeah, maybe Anomaly will join the Mises Caucus. That'd be sweet, because Anomaly's pretty based.
Well, any of you who can get people on board for that discussion, and we'll just get like a significant amount of like actual libertarians, and they got to be libertarians, they got to be self-identified, so that we can have the next real libertarians be a real like strong tackling of certain philosophical things. That's what I want. I want Sunday to be like less party, more philosophy, more actual hitting these things hard. So, with that being said, closing statements.
I'll start. For me, it's real simple. Every bad political position you have kills somebody. They'll kill you, whether it's something like a traffic ticket or the type of dog or borders or whatever it is, it will kill somebody. This is why we can't like agree to disagree a lot. And let's be honest, that's really fair to be like, no, I don't want to just let it go when there's somebody who's going to get killed because of this, right? Someone's going to die if nobody contests the lockdown. Somebody's going to die if nobody contests the border. Somebody's going to die, and we don't want people to die. We don't want innocent people to die. So every bad political position will kill somebody, which is why we're so passionate about various positions. if you haven't had a friend who's an immigrant, or somebody who got molested at the border and didn't get any justice, or if you haven't had a friend who's gay and experienced abuse in a government school, or if you haven't had a friend who's had a business that shut down, or a car get towed, you might not know or feel this any pain. Just say, I don't think this is that big a deal, right? But it's somebody's whole world. It's somebody's whole life. And that's why, to me, like, libertarianism overall is so important. That we, and here's where I come to to conclude this conversation specifically. Nobody is perfect, including myself, besides Jeremy. But most people aren't perfect. And so the issue is that we don't know what we're wrong about, most of us. We think we're right about it, you know? I don't think that the Bordertarians go, haha, murder, fantastic. I just think they don't give a crap, right? They haven't had a friend go through it. They haven't gone through it themselves. They haven't had to seek a better life. Most of them are quite privileged, you know, or at least hang with privileged company that hasn't had to deal with the abuse, the fines, the endless waiting, molestation, the concentration camps, all of it. Like, they haven't had to deal with that. So they don't care, right? They're like, I'll sacrifice that. I don't care. Couple million people, whatever, screw them, right? Like that's just a few. Well, the thing is, there's other people that aren't going to let it go. But that being said, I don't want to just drive all Bordertarians out. So where I land on this issue is that we need to not be, I don't want to say party, because obviously we talk a lot about party politics, but I don't want the liberty movement to be about being perfect. What I want the libertarian movement to be is about being perfecting, and this is what kept the Christian lights on for so long. Nobody was perfect. I mean, especially as a small little religion, everybody was having some issues with some tenets of the faith. Now, it wasn't that those issues didn't matter. Judgment matters, murder matters, theft matters, adultery matters. Like, these things matter. But the thing is you say, hey, come on in, be a part of this environment, and within this environment, we will fix those problems. Now, how you can tell you're in, you say, well, that's why we have to assess the culture every so often. When you're with 30 people, and I've been here too. I don't want to just make this like a Mises thing, so I'll give both examples. When you're with a bunch of Mises people and somebody calls somebody else a gay slur, and nobody says anything, that's your sign that you're not perfecting anymore, right? You're giving in. You're saying, you know what? I'll let the social issue go. Fine. Bigotry's fine. It's cool with me. I'm good with it. But likewise, if you're hanging out with another group, I'm with a bunch of environmentalists, and one of them goes, I'm okay with stopping people on their way to work or slashing tires on a car, and 30 other people stay silent. Bad culture. We're not in a situation where we're perfecting. We're in a situation where we've said violence against people is okay, right? And so there comes a point where we have to be like, hey, I got to take charge of this culture. I'm going to be the person responsible for it. I'm not going to let it go anymore. I'm sick of letting it go. Because if you don't know somebody who's gone through these terrible things and you have no dog in the fight, then you have two choices. One is you can either get involved, get to know somebody who has, and educate yourself, develop that empathy, gain a friend, gain that understanding, or you can just be a statist, right? Just screw it. Be a statist. That's a plenty good option for most of the population. I think most of us on this call don't want that. But we're unsure of where to go because all we look at is choices where I say, well, these guys are going to sacrifice the social, these guys are going to sacrifice gay rights. These guys are going to sacrifice rights at the border. These guys are okay with lockdowns. These guys, no more. What it's time to do is to not kick people out if they're imperfect, but confront them, call them on it, and drive them to be better. Don't drive them out. Give them some encouragement. Highly encourage reading books on how to influence people, how to win opinions, how to win friends. Obviously, there's a very famous book with that title breakdown. But things like that. Learn how to converse with people in a way that will make them change. Because your only other option is to drive people out. And libertarians, we aren't going to win with the army we have. We just aren't. So if your idea is, I'm going to eventually intellectually be so correct that the world will change, it's never happened once. Not once in the history of this planet. So abandon that and learn some persuasion skills, especially with your friends, because those are the people who most value your opinion. If you are in the Mises Caucus, poking at the Sarwarkians, the Catos, the Reasons all day, you're going nowhere. You're fixing nothing. Look inside. Pull the plank out of your own eye. If you are with the Sarwarks, the Catos, the Reasons, and you see them mess up, same deal.
Yep.
Pull that plank out of your eye. If you spend all day just criticizing the Mises Caucus, you're going nowhere. You're doing nothing. These cars haven't gone anywhere in a long time. You're just spinning in the mud, right? So fix what you can. Fix your own circles. That's the best improvement that you're going to make. And from there, we got a really good shot to smash the state. It's amazing to think about how these things creep up. You look at times when, I mean, Lincoln, when the third party just crept up, or Millay taking office. Now these people, in both Lincoln and Millay's case, have severe imperfections. But we can see how, hey, it's possible that just a few years from now, this country could consider itself a libertarian country. In just a couple of years, just very quickly. All it takes is people running out of food, and that's happening. People being out of jobs, people hurting, people's neighbors dying, people being the victims of mass genocide or mass abuse or bigotry. And all of a sudden they say, I need something else. Where are the libertarians at? Just be ready when you get that, because man, there's real hope for this world. I'm obviously a white pill kind of guy. I don't see things negatively. I do see a lot of positivity on the horizon, but regardless of what you see, you should be part of the solution. Or if everything falls apart and goes bad, be part of the people who were wrong or who lost, right? Be one of the abolitionists, right? They lost, but they were right. And they did right, and they tried their best to make that happen. I would rather try and fail for the right thing than win and be one of the guys who sold out an entire race of human beings, right? Like, let's settle with being the losers and being right, but let's also try to be convincing. That's all I got. It's awesome, as always. Talk with all you guys.
Huh? Thank you. What you got, Kareem?
All right, that was a pretty good speech, Ani Johns. I like it. So I'd say you could be part of the solution, or if you're on Dave Smith's show, you could be part of the problem. But for me, I agree with basically everything you said. One thing we can take into account, though, is we can kind of take different ideas and work with them. One thing I recommend is, a lot of people have read Rothbard or have looked at Rothbard in the Mises Caucus. Well, I say, okay, cool. A more practical thing that I used to talk about was like, how do you divide power? Obviously I was new to left-wing writers. I can't, Keith, who's pretty awesome with stuff, mentioned Murray Bookchin. I sat down and said, what's this communalism thing about? I think libertarians can win. Like, I get people make fun, haha, you won dog catcher, you won mayor, you won school board, you won this, you won the town hall guy. But I'm like, wait, if you effectively take these local positions and transform them into something workable that does not need federal power, and we do that, which is possible across multiple cities or municipalities or counties, effectively we've created a dual power structure like Bookchin talks about. And I think that's something that's possible as well. So you don't need to have an army right now. We should convince more people. We can also win, to me, in local races. Other than that, I think coalitioning is useful if we're going to talk about not wanting innocent people to die. I think the border is a big one, definitely educating people on that, educating people on what's actually going on, educating people that, hey, just putting up a wall and mercantilist solutions aren't going to work. And also the anti-war message, I think, is pretty good. Like, even if somebody's imperfect, I'd go with the anti-war message. And I think someone who has a very good anti-war message that more libertarians should look to is Jill Stein, Cornel West. Now, they're not we probably disagree on energy policy or something like that, or maybe even economics. I don't know exactly what her economics is, but it doesn't matter because I can disagree on that. There are some things I can agree to disagree. Someone can say, I want free markets, and someone can say, I don't want free markets, or I want this thing sold, or I want to engage in commerce this way, or I don't, or I want to use money, or I don't. And I'm open to all economic possibilities. Some people can say, I want to use wind and solar energy. I want to use nuclear energy. I want to use something else. That's cool. But when it gets into the realm of, what's going on in the Middle East, or when it goes into the realm of fighting a nuclear power, which some people are like, yeah, let's get China. I'm like, that's not something I can agree to disagree on, because if I agree to disagree on that, well, we end up in a global conflict or worse. So for me, that's what I'm trying to do is, hey, find the people who are like super anti-imperialist, super anti-war. Doesn't really matter what their background is. Doesn't matter if they're perfect, and work with those people. If we can get pretty good on that, and if we can get pretty good on other big issues like central banking and war, if we can nail those two, and if we can win local races, I think we got a pretty good shot of turning stuff around. I don't see it happening so much like Lincoln or Malay. I see it like, hey, a few Mises Caucus people won mayor and Libertarian dog catcher, and this county's a lot better. And then other counties say, how can I make my county like that? And then that's how you win, from the bottom up, not from the top down. Although I'd still support Amash for Congress. So there's that. Go check out Spike Cohen's debate with David Hogg, if you want to call that a debate. And go check out Anomaly and Dave Smith.
It was reasonably good. So, Rose, final closing statement.
Oh, no, I think I've pretty much said all there is to say. Yeah, gonna have to get going pretty soon. So if anyone else has anything that they'd like to get out there.
I'll just say, I'm down to have conversations with any of y'all. I'm not trying to shut down conversations. I'm not one of the people who's trying to blackball. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to establish certain cultural currents. And I'm trying to make it absolutely clear what currents I will not support. So I think that this might have been clarifying on my perspective, and that it's not nearly as hashtag loser brigade E as some people might want to claim. And just as an aside, because I have to, the person who made that phrase, he's a groomer. So just gonna say that before I go. But the general mentality that I want to confer is I'm willing to have conversations with if the Tower Gang wants to talk, if Clint wants to talk, under the understanding that I'm still that guy, then I'm down to talk. If any of the leftists out there want to talk about their strategy, the purpose of this channel, what I want this channel to be is a channel where people can have reasonable discussions. And I also want people to be able to come on here and have this sort of mentality of, I'm going to be able to speak my piece. I never want this channel to be one of those channels where people are getting routinely interrupted and shit. I never want this channel to be one of those channels where people are talking over and past each other. The point that I'm trying to make here is, I'm open to comms. I'm not trying to shut them down. I'm not trying to say that anyone who is affiliated with anyone should die. What I'm trying to say is, when we start to see these affiliations build up, that's the basis for culture. The webs, the networks that get developed, that's the basis for culture. And we have to be very fucking careful about what cultures we foster. That's my statement. That's my statement in a nutshell. Be careful, because every culture that you have a problem with, whoever you are out there, every culture that you have a problem with is a culture that was allowed to take root. So, if you see a problem, do something about it. Don't just remain silent. Don't You can't be neutral on a moving train. Actually start the discourse. The worst thing that happens is you find out you were wrong. But I don't think I'm very wrong when I say I oppose those who are agents of white power or who think that that's based. I think that there are certain things that I just won't tolerate, won't condone, and I don't think that that's actually wrong. And my goal is to show people that there is another way and that there is a better way forward. I'm not perfect. I'm a fucking asshole. But at the very least, like, I want to get the conversation going so that people can understand what they're supporting and when and maybe even why. And when you start breaking it down to those brass tacks, a lot more people are going to start asking a lot more questions. That's what I want. It's a too complacent environment. People are trying not to rock the boats. There are very few people with a spine to begin with. Well, I'm a hedgehog. I got plenty of spines to go around.
Let's go. One of my I was just gonna say, rest in peace. One of my friends. I knew him actually. I met him at convention. Actually, the first time I hit him up, it was like, "Hey, you're a Tennessee libertarian." And he's like, "Yeah." I said, "Do you want to come on my show with Max Henry?" And he did. This is way back when they started coming on my shows. He had me on. It was like Rich Gracia. I can't think of the name. He had a friend in Tennessee. It was an older dude.
About the bootleg libertarian?
Yeah, bootleg. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, I don't know exactly what happened. I just heard I think he was like 30 or something.
Yeah.
Like, my age group, and passed away. Now, obviously, I have my suspicions of what I think because he wasn't sick or anything. But I don't know. But yeah, that really sucks.
Well,
He was a good dude.
a toast to the fallen then. We do have to wrap though, so I'll just wrap with the standard thing. Be more libertarian every day. Smash the fucking state.
Bash the fashion, make some cash.
All right.